Well, Slickhawk, judging by the traffic, folks are back at work today. It's about 10 times as many cars on the road today as there were yesterday driving into work. So,
well, there weren't any yesterday.
There were basically none yesterday.
So you're saying there are no cars out there?
No, there's still.
As you know, 10 times 0 equals 0.
That's good. That Green River math is treating you well. What's going on in the world of sports? We'll give you the top of the hour headlines, get you set up with what's going on the show. Hugh Breedlove Millen's going to join us in a few minutes. Mariners lose to the Astros yesterday, but they don't lose any ground in this ridiculously mediocre wild card race and remain 2.5 games out. Felix Hernandez threw 37 pitches in his bullpen session yesterday. Mariners making another move. Surprise, surprise. They've claimed Jacob Hanneman from the Royals. They've claimed right-handed pitcher Seth Frankoff from the Cubs. And to make room, they transferred David Phelps to the 60-day DL. Boy, that move, at least for 2017, was an absolute flop. They gave up four prospects for a guy that will pitch 11 innings in 2017. Almost a prospect every 3 innings. And they designated Zach Curtis for assignment. Baseball America, by the way, rated Hanneman the best speed rating possible, called him the best athlete in the Cubs system, but only their 23rd ranked prospect overall. D-backs J.D. Martinez becomes only the 18th player in Major League Baseball history to hit 4 home runs in a game in a 13-0 win over L.A. I believe he only had 1 as they entered the 7th inning. And he got jack at the end of the game. So fewer players have hit 4 home runs in a game than have pitched a perfect game. I think there's like 22 or 23, something like that, perfect games. 18 players to hit 4 home runs or more. Cubs' Jake Arrieta pulled from his start yesterday with a hamstring injury. No word on how much time he will miss, but the team is hopeful he can pitch this weekend. Great game last night. How about just following up that UCLA-Texas A&M game on Sunday night with another great one last night in college football. 25th-ranked Tennessee comes from behind. They beat Georgia Tech in double overtime, 42-41. I watched the whole second half of that game. Really fun to watch that game. Georgia Tech goes for the 2-point conversion and the win.
Running that Army offense.
They were.
The triple option.
And if Army had that quarterback that Georgia Tech had, they'd cover every spread by 16.5. Which
Army's
was your
quarterback is pretty good.
Factor fiction from yesterday.
249 yards, I think you ran for the other day.
Unbelievable what the Georgia Tech quarterback. We'll get into that in a little bit. Hawks have established their 10-player practice squad. Trevon Boykin, Mike Davis, Cyril Grayson, David Moore, Joey Hunt, Garrison Smith, Tyrone Swoops, and Mike Tyson retained by the team. They also picked up a couple guys from other teams to put them on the practice squad. Linebacker Austin Calitro, selected after being cut by the Niners, and offensive tackle Jaron Jones, released by the Giants. Your newly acquired Sheldon Richardson will wear number 91. Isaiah Battle, number 79. Justin Coleman is number 28. Some injuries in the NFL. Bills starting quarterback Tyrod Taylor in concussion protocol. May not play Sunday in the opener. Odell Beckham missed practice. Fantasy players out there worried. His ankle injury. He is questionable for Sunday. And Andrew Luck ruled out for Sunday. Scott Tolzien gets the start at quarterback. Here we go. Yes, oh yes, people are back. There's the 2 things I noticed that were blatantly obvious coming in today. 1, people are back at work. 2, in the, 8 years, 7 years since I've been coming in very, very early in the morning, I don't think there's ever been a day where I looked at my car and it said 73 degrees at 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah,
I don't think that
warm.
has ever happened in my entire... I mean, that does not happen in Seattle. That happens in Miami in the summertime. But
there may have also only been one other time you went out to your car and there was ash on it.
Was there ash on your car? Like smoke?
Ash.
Ash? From the fires?
Yeah.
Really?
Ash.
Wow. I remember ash at my house on, in 1980 when Mount St. Helens was blowing up. I remember that.
Yeah.
I didn't have any. Well, of course, I guess one thing would protect my car would be a carport. I would not have ash on my car. But so you actually had the fire ash on your car this morning.
Yeah.
That is brutal. Brutal. Hugh Breedlove Millen.
Yeah, I could smell it this morning.
Oh, it was gross. And watching the sun go down last night, where you can just stare at that orange orb instead of being blinded by it. I mean, it was just right there. You could just look right at it. Didn't need those funky glasses we had a couple weeks ago or anything.
You sure?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I can't.
Your ophthalmologist?
I can't really see you very well.
So go ahead
right
and just
now.
stare
Well,
that thing
I didn't
down?
stare at it for 10 seconds, but you could look at it without it hurting your eyes at least.
Okay.
I don't know. Probably not a good. My Dr. Sharp at Sharp Vision Modern LASIK
you might be back in now.
might be giving me a call saying, we may need to check on you again and see how you're doing.
Check on you. May need to operate on you.
What's
again.
this weird orb that when I close my eyes, I still see it in my brain? What's going on, man?
What's happening? How are you?
I was two nights in a row, and you kind of were the guy that took us through the Texas A&M UCLA game 2 nights ago, but another great football game last night. Another great college football game last night that I kind of, stumbled on. I knew it was on, but doing stuff with the family, having dinner, all that sort of stuff. But I was able to kind of sit down with about 9 or 10 minutes left in the third quarter. So I was able to watch the whole second half, the first overtime, the second overtime. Tennessee looked like they were dead. They come back. And I don't know how much chance you got to watch that last night, but this kid from Georgia Tech, this quarterback from Georgia Tech, you talk about one of those guys that just you want to gain respect from everyone else out on the field, whether it's your team, whether it's the other team. Here's how you do it. You be probably the smallest guy on the field. You throw the ball only 9 times, but 5 of 9 for 120 yards. You then carry the ball, Hugh, 44 times for 249 yards and 5 touchdowns.
Yeah.
You get knocked out of the game multiple times because you're taking shots from 260-pounders. You're flat on your back. You get up. You limp off the field. You take like 2 or 3 plays off, you get checked out, and you come right back out and do it again and carry it 44 times at like 180 pounds. Unbelievable.
Well, he's got some wiggle to him. There's no question about that. And you're right, everything you said. I'm a little bit tempered in my enthusiasm about it just because I know it's a brilliant system. They're putting up a lot of points, but I'm just not down. I am not down for a college football game that lasts 90 minutes, and you throw 9 times? No. I actually found myself watching the Tennessee quarterback and thinking that he maybe had some NFL potential to him. He just had a look about him and how he hung in the pocket and read defenses and made big time throws. So I was stylistically, I'd much prefer the Tennessee way.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about this guy being an NFL quarterback or even the style of the game was something that you'd obviously like to see more balance. But my God,
that's why I agree with everything you said. Yeah,
44 carries for a quarterback weighing like 175 pounds soaking wet. It was absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, well, they come at you with an offense, obviously, that is so unorthodox that it's hard with everybody else doing either this, most teams nowadays are doing the college spread,
right?
Where you got everybody spread out, obviously, and then you've got passing concepts, some more sophisticated than others, but there's a passing concept, and there's bubble screens when you have athletic quarterbacks, and the read zone where quarterbacks are keeping it up in the alley, but they take the running quarterback to a whole nother level.
That's Paul Johnson came from Navy, right? I believe he was the Navy quarterback.
Yeah, then Navy would be another program that loves to run it as well, but not many. When you go through the list of 130 and you say, well, how many are just philosophically married to the running game? Well, you just name 2.
Yeah, out of maybe 3 or 4 total.
Yeah, probably count on a hand.
And our pick from yesterday.
That's right.
For the Fact or Fiction.
That's right. And
Army.
We should probably remind people or let people know what Fact or Fiction is because, a lot of people obviously were on vacation yesterday, not listening to the show, but we have a new contest that we run at 8:30 every day where one member of the morning show we'll rotate it around. Slickhawk was the guy yesterday. I think I'll do the pick today. But one member of the morning show at 8:30 every day will simply make a pick of a college or a pro football game. That's it. That's all. It'll be against the spread. Or I imagine I can do over-unders, right? Can I do an over-under? I mean, that's a 50-50 wager as well. Does it have to? Does
Probably.
it have? You might have to ask assistant program director Kevin Shockey.
Yeah,
because I gotta warn you. I'm leaning that way at 8:30 today. Nobody's told me I can't put an over/under on it.
Okay.
So I'm leaning towards that way, and then all you got to do is you have 12
to find unders that nobody else sees.
Love them, and you got 12 minutes after whoever on our show gives our pick. You got 12 minutes to text 49451. You simply text one of two words. You either text the word fact if you think the pick is going to be correct, or you text the word fiction if you think that we're full of crap, and you basically are in the hopper for a $1,000 weekly prize. You are also in the hopper for a $10,000 overall prize. Now, the catch for the $10,000 prize, Slickhawk, is what? For the season-long prize.
It's whoever gets the most right, fact or fiction, over the entire year.
Cumulative wins. So you have to play. If you want $10,000, you got to play throughout the season. And you have an opportunity to play with us. You have opportunity to play on Softy's show in the afternoon as well.
See, these 6 o'clock listeners, I think you give them too much. I would have just simply said this. The Emerald Queen Casino is giving away a cubic butt ton of money. At 8:30 every day.
Yes,
and you need to listen and be prepared to text one word, and you can win that cubic butt ton of money.
Are you calling 6 o'clock listeners simpletons?
No, I'm just saying, you know what? You're giving them too much, man. You're giving them too much.
Greg Bell's going to join us at 7 o'clock today. Daily schnozzes, montages. Hugh will have something to say, as he always does, at 8 o'clock. We will hear from both of the local coaches. That would be Pete Carroll right after Greg Bell at 7 o'clock. We will hear from Chris Peterson at 9 o'clock, as well as they look back on Saturday's game in the terms of, or excuse me, Friday's games in the terms of Chris Peterson. Thursday for Pete Carroll, and obviously more importantly, looking ahead at Week 1 against the Green Bay Packers for the Hawks, and the Huskies have got another Patsy on the way for this weekend as their road continues, as they've had the last couple years. But Hugh, we spent some time talking about the Dogs yesterday, but we have to remember that there's a lot of Husky fans out there that were camping and at the lake and doing things. So I do want to kind of to go over maybe first of all your overall picture of what you saw on Friday night, the synopsis, and then I got a couple things that we didn't hammer on yesterday too much that I want to get your take on. So, give the Dog fans out there maybe your Cliff Notes version, your overall picture that you kind of spoke about yesterday a little bit.
Cliff Notes version. Well, I think that first of all, you look at the opponent, Rutgers, and they were a 2-win team a year ago. They don't strike me as a great football team, but within them, I definitely got the impression that while in the Big Ten they may be near the bottom, I think that they're better on the lines. They're more physical than they are fast. I think the fast guys, the guys that are supposed to be fast, aren't as fast as the strong guys are supposed to be strong. If that makes sense. So I think that the Huskies didn't really dominate the trenches the way you would expect. This was a team a year ago, Rutgers, that allowed 5.7 yards per attempt, third worst in all of college football, again, about 130 teams. And so I was just a little disappointed. I think there's some assignment errors in just kind of the backside cutoffs, guys getting some penetration and maybe some communication issues where you look and you say, okay, that guy, that guy's coming a little bit too scot-free, and I think that was maybe exemplified on Mix and the run in the past, but on the big hit on Jake Browning, they're sending 4 guys to Jake Browning's left, and in that formation, you'd like to have ideally the center against a 3-man to that side, to Jake Browning's right, you'd want the center to slide over there ideally, and then you'd be hot off your left side where all of your receivers are. So that if you feel pressure, that's kind of the direction you're looking.
Right.
And you can, release, the running back's on a hot release, and you can throw him a ball or what have you, or maybe there's another, flat route or shallow cross type of thing. That I'm just talking conceptually how you'd like to do it is throw into the face of the pressure as opposed to the pressure away from your direction. So I just think that they weren't as on point as they'd like to be. I think they finally, they exerted their physicality, but it took them to the second half. And Myles Gaskin, the patience of him, he just seemed to have, the right style where he was quick enough. Again, I thought the team speed by Rutgers, I think, was poor. I think they were strong. If it was just if they went in the Big Ten and it was just a tug of war contest between them and all the linemen, I'm going to assume Ohio State could beat them in a tug of war contest. Okay,
right?
You get it, but I think
Wisconsin can probably beat them in a tug of war contest.
But I think that the degree that Wisconsin beat them in Wisconsin or Ohio State would beat them in a tug of war would be less than the Ohio State secondary would beat them in a relay race.
Because that would be
the team's speed just wasn't there for Rutgers. But Myles Gaskin was able to exploit that finally. So I think there was just a lack of physicality. I mentioned it to you yesterday. Drew Sample, from my way of thinking, when he catches a flat there, instead of trying to dance on a DB, who's going to have the athletic superiority to him in space, and he's tucked up against the sideline. Instead of him dancing, trying to avoid, I'd rather just see him truck him in that situation. Now it's a split second decision. He's in a lot of space. Does he try and make a guy miss? For my money, I'd rather see him, just bowl somebody over. But I don't want to pick on Drew Sample. He had a nice few catches there, and he, along with Will Dissly, I really like their tight ends. Dissly maybe more so as a blocker, but
right. Is Hunter Bryant a tight end in your mind, or is he going to be a wide receiver?
No, I think he's a tight end.
Okay.
No, he's a tight end. I've seen him without a shirt on.
He's a man
for a true freshman. No, he's that's a badass kid. So I think they've got him exactly where they need to have him. Is he 6'6"? Is he Gronkowski? No, but he appears to be about 6'3", maybe 6'4" on a good day.
And stacked.
But there's a fluidity. Well, he has a thick frame. Mm-hmm. His legs and his upper body. He's got a very well developed frame for a freshman. And he really runs well. There's a fluidity to him. There's a speed. There's a change of direction in and out. I just love his movements. Great hands. I think this guy's going to be a top flight college tight end before too long. It could happen this year. But it's more likely to pop next year. But he's going to give you some. He's going to wow you. No, he's a great recruit, and I think he's got a great future. But
local kid too, Eastside Catholic. So it's good to see.
Yeah. I still think that they're trying to find their way with the wide receiving group. There's no question Dante Pettis has star power. You see him as a possession receiver. You see him on a post route, and he doesn't have John Ross's speed, but he's fast enough. He's pretty damn fast. And so he's as solid as he could be, as we mentioned the tight ends. But I feel like there's still, one extra guy. Chico McClatcher's out there starting. They got some other guys that are smallish. And I thought on a few crossing routes, the lack of size was a factor. I just think as a quarterback, you want a guy on some of those deep crossing routes. You'd like to throw to a bigger target. Out on the perimeter, obviously the quickness is great, but sometimes over the middle, you'd rather be a little bigger there. So they got Braden Linnaeus. They're moving him in. So I think that they're still trying to kind of find an extra guy that can really bring some horsepower to that pass offense. Mm-hmm. And so that may be a factor for why they were held up. Defensively, loved Taylor Rapp. Taylor Rapp to me was probably the guy that I was happiest with. I just thought he exerted a physicality that was welcome. In many ways it reminded me of Earl Thomas's style. Now he's not as fast, getting from point A to point B, but he's a heady guy. He's a terrific tackler in open space, a willing tackler. He wanted to bring the hammer. He did several times. So really happy with Taylor Rapp. Byron Murphy, just like we've been talking about all spring, he just seems to have a knack for a big play.
Yeah.
His second one, he kind of freed up. We talked about how, the receiver ran a shallow cross away from him, so that allowed him to free up in zone coverage and read the eyeballs of the quarterback. He did that like a veteran. So it's a good start for him to make a couple of interceptions. On the other side, Jordan Miller, for the most part, no news is good news. He was not conspicuous in his presence in the football game, and that isn't necessarily bad. Here I'm complimenting Byron Murphy rather for the 2 interceptions. On the other side, Jordan Miller, early in the game he gives up a 5-yard completion for him. Okay, well if that's all I can remember, good game. Young man, right?
That's like what we want from Shaq Griffin this Sunday. We want Shaq Griffin to be conconspicuous in his absence on the field.
On the first drive, I remember him giving up an Oscar route for 6 yards. Okay, you know what? I'll take that. Sign me up. So the front 7. I thought they could have been a little bit better shedding blocks. I would not say they're starters. Those 2, Gaines and Vita Vea inside. I thought that they held their ground okay, but I don't know that they shed and really were as impactful as often as I expected. I thought they'd, grab their guy, shed and really get to the ball. That linebackers, maybe I could say the same thing about them. That just seemed like there was a little bit more push against the Husky front 7 than I expected.
Especially early on.
Especially early on, yeah. It's nice to be able, the program. They have been so good and they're so well coached for them to now be in a position where they can fly across the country and play a Big Ten team that redid their weight room. We talked yesterday,
right?
You saw the documentary there where they had a massive facilities upgrade, and I think when those things happen, they tend to engender a mindset of really trying to get stronger, realizing, hey, you're in the Big Ten, you got to have those facilities. So I think the big guys, as I said, were really committed to getting stronger, and that showed for Rutgers. Well, correspondingly, I think for the Huskies, they didn't dominate at the level as maybe I expected, but it's okay. You're 30-16, you come out of it and you're healthy, you get the win. Jake Browning didn't get his collarbone broken on that one.
Could have gotten everything broken.
Yeah.
That could have been.
He could be in the concussion protocol.
Could have been
there's a lot of bad
disaster
things
for the season right there. Had that.
A little different.
Yeah.
So you get Azim Victor back. I think that's going to really help, and Austin Joyner. So I think you're at full strength. You're going against obviously a feeble opponent. Relatively, Montana should be a blowout. I don't expect there to be any phase of the game where you come back and are suspect. That should be a level of dominance across. This is just gussied up practice really. So
we'll talk about Jake a little bit later. We don't have time right now, but we didn't actually get into Jake very much yesterday and the type of progress, if any, that you saw in Jake Browning from this year to last year, either with the shoulder strength or with his play. But we'll get into that a little bit more a little bit later in this hour. But we got the morning montage coming up next. We got Seahawks at 7 with Greg Bell coming up at the top of the hour. You'll hear from Pete Carroll, Schnozzes. Hugh will have something to say at 8 o'clock. We got our contest, Fact or Fiction. You're going to make sure you text in at 49451. You're either going to agree or disagree with my pick of the day that I will make at 8:30 today. You'll hear from Chris Peterson, the 9 o'clock hour, and great debate as well. We are rolling on a Tuesday. Hey, welcome back to work, everybody. We were already here yesterday.
Montage with Mitch in the morning.
Oh, my goodness!
Brought to you by Washington's Lottery. Visit walottery.com.
.631 on 950 KJR. Hugh Breedlove Millen is here. Slickhawk is here. Niner Nate. We are Talking about lots of stuff today. Pete Carroll, a lot of Seahawks today as Pete Carroll addressed a number of things yesterday. Chris Peterson did as well, so you'll hear from both of those gentlemen later on in the show. But right now it's time for the morning montage. And Slickhawk, I thought maybe Erasmo was rolling. Siegs hit that big home run, and then it slips away with the bullpen yesterday.
Over Valencia's head and into right field. Gonzalez scoring, McCann rounding, Haniger trying to stay with it. 2 runs cross, 2 in scoring position, and the Astros lead it 4-2.
Mariners not able to get bullpen yesterday. They got solid starting pitching again, and if you take a look at what they've been doing, you know, we've been making fun of these starters for a long time, but all of a sudden, Mike Leake, Andrew Albers, now what's this, the 5th? What I hear yesterday, the 5th consecutive quality start for Erasmo Ramirez.
Is it?
Yeah. Erasmo Ramirez starting to pitch, but then Zepchinski and Vincent were brutal yesterday, and the Mariners lose. But still just 2.5 games back because everybody else is losing as well. So that's the good news, is that nobody wants to grab the second wild card spot. And I saw where Felix Hernandez is pitching a little bit. James Paxton is pitching. Hisashi Iwakuma is pitching. And there is a possibility that before the end of the season, all 3 of them could be back in the rotation. The question is, will the Mariners be 1 out with a week to play when we can throw those guys in there into the rotation, or will they be 4 out and will the season be over with a week to play when we put those guys back into the rotation?
Well, you know what? If they make it, they'll have fresh arms. For
they
the
will
playoffs.
have very fresh arms. I think the rest of the league will be going, wait a second, this isn't even fair. We got to face Paxton and Felix, who haven't pitched for like 2 months. What's going on here? Pete Carroll talks about the team cutting our man Big Rubes.
Another huge guy to let go with it was hard to do, but there's just all kinds of concerns to make this happen, and Sheldon comes in and plays, but Nas Jones made as much of a statement about that as well. So we'll have to figure out the rotations. We're down to just a few guys in there right now, and those guys have to come through and make the plays. We had to make a move with somebody.
Hugh, what'd you think of Rubes last year? Did he drop at all last year from the year prior, or was he pretty much, was there any noticeable degradation in his game?
No, I think he was relatively consistent. I think he's a guy that at his best is going to not get pushed around, but I don't know that he's going to play a lot of plays on your side of the line of scrimmage. You're just hoping he doesn't play deep on our side.
Right.
And, that's kind of how they've been with their 3 techniques. They haven't paid him a lot. Mm-hmm. They've had a lot in there. Tony McDaniel, Alan Branch, Clinton McDonald, Ty Berubin, a lot of those guys.
Space eaters.
They're not exceedingly athletic.
Yeah.
And then you've had, the one technique guys, the Brandon Meebane, he manned that position for a long time. And Taba played the one technique as well, so he's gone back and forth. And he's a guy who's been solid, but not spectacular. I mean, I think you look at that defense, you can't have real legitimate superstars everywhere, and he's just been kind of a guy that's manned his position adequately.
We'll hear more from Pete Carroll here in about a half hour after the Seahawks at 7 with Greg Bell. Chris Peterson talks about the Huskies' slow start offensively.
I think the big thing was we got off to a slow start on offense, those first 2 drives. And then when their plan's going to be just to, milk the clock and hold the ball, it was decent strategy when you're starting slow. We had the ball, I think, 23 plays in the first half. And we had the ball most of the fourth quarter. We still lost the time of possession game. I think it was like 21-38, something like that. So, that's fine. We'll win close, lower scoring games. But from our side of the, thing, we got to be more efficient on offense, start faster.
Well, it was the third quarter that they started ramping it up, Hugh, and they used that no huddle at the beginning of the second half, and the third quarter tail of the tape was 184 yards and 17 points in one quarter of football. That's pretty darn good. The problem was the other 3 quarters they weren't doing much.
Yeah. Well, you'd expect that the fatigue would start to be a factor. Defensive guys have to chase the ball, offensive guys don't. So, yeah, when I was a kid, when they talked about the defense getting tired, I said, well, wait a minute, the offense is out there too. Why aren't they getting tired? Well,
right.
For that reason, any defensive player is going to get a loaf if he's not sprinting to the ball. So it's just the nature of defensive football. So they finally caught up with him.
Does the offense get tired when you're? I mean, how tired? I was wondering that when I was watching. When Myles Gaskin was getting the ball, he's running for 12 yards and he was sprinting back to the, sprinting back to the backfield, and he was getting the ball again for 8 yards. But you got some adrenaline going, you got some momentum going. But is there a big time fatigue factor on those guys on offense too?
My experience is that it just depends on the kid. There's more likely to be a fatigue factor the bigger you are.
Yeah.
A bigger back, in theory, would get more fatigue. But some of those guys get stronger as game goes on. I think it's just a DNA thing. I mean, that was remarkable to me in the Floyd Mayweather fight against Conor McGregor. You can talk about all the discrepancies, and whether it's quickness or strength, reach, what have you. I thought the biggest discrepancy in the fight was the conditioning level.
Right.
Mayweather looked like he could have fought 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
And McGregor, after 5 rounds, just looked like his gloves were made of cement. And just a gigantic difference. Now, you're going to say experience. There's a gigantic experience factor, of course. I'm talking about the physical factors. And so I think running backs are the same way. I think some guys just say, hey, hand it to me again. I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
Other guys, it really takes a toll. So, but Gaskin obviously is a guy who can just keep going, a little energizer bunny.
Chris Ballard, Slick, is this the offensive coordinator of the
believe
Colts?
So. Yeah.
Announcing that Andrew Luck will not be the starting quarterback week 1.
Still no timetable. We're still, look, he's in the training phase right now. He's done excellent with his rehab, and we'll still continue to take it week to week. He'll be out this week versus the Rams, but we'll still take it week to week.
Boy, oh boy, that could be. Oh, Chris Ballard's the general manager. My mistake, general manager. But, boy, Andrew Luck missing week 1. How long will that stretch? Because the Colts are one of those teams that I think people figure are kind of bubble teams as far as if everything goes right, they could make the playoffs, but everything's already not going right at the beginning of the season.
I took him off of PUP so he could come back at any time.
Right. Brock Osweiler talks about his return to Denver.
I want people to know that decision didn't come lightly. I didn't sleep for about a week. I was sick to my stomach every single day. I was a mess. And at the end of the day, I tried making the best business decision for myself and my family. Whether I made the best one or not, that could be argued. But the fact of the matter is, it was made. I'm not going to live in the past, but I've always had nothing but love and appreciation for the Denver Broncos and the city of Denver.
People that drafted Le'Veon Bell either number 1 or number 2 overall in their fantasy draft can breathe easier.
He couldn't get a contract after the deadline. So what was the holdout about? What was the stay out about?
I want to make sure I'll be prepared and fresh for the season. I don't want to go out there, jeopardize myself getting hurt in camp. Obviously I understand I'm on a 1-year deal, so I got to go out there and prepare and go out there and play football. I didn't want to get hurt in camp. My rookie year, I remember getting hurt in camp and things like that. So I didn't even want to deal with it. I want to go out here, get ready for game 1. The games that count, and go out there and get ready to win a Super Bowl.
He is so unique, Hugh. Le'Veon Bell, the guy that you teach running backs to, hey, let's get ahead of steam as you take that ball from the quarterback's hand and hit that hole hard, and Le'Veon Bell literally takes the ball and just stops. He just stops in the backfield and just waits. Okay, where's the hole going to develop? Okay, boom, now I'll go through that hole. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like it, but it's a unique style that he makes work, and you have to have great vision. You have to have great acceleration. It'd be interesting just how good he'd be in an orthodox style, as you mentioned, but at this juncture, I hope he's not pioneering a new way. Because I guess I'm old school. I like to see running backs hit the hole harder, but I do find myself fascinated when I watch him, and they got a great guard in David DeCastro, the Bellevue product that really plays well in space. So on some of those gap schemes where he's following him, he just kind of sits in behind his wake and finds those spots, but then he does it in zone blocking too. He's just He's just a very unique running back and a very good one, obviously.
Jason Garrett says Ezekiel Elliott will keep preparing week in and week out until there's a resolution.
We're just going to prepare for the Giants, and Zeke will practice until someone tells him not to, and the other guys will get ready to play.
And finally, last night, we mentioned it in the first segment, Georgia Tech going for 2 and misses in double overtime.
Waits for the snap. Going to roll right. Going to tuck it up. He's not going to make it. Tennessee stops him. Marshall tried to turn it up, and the ball is picked free, and the Tennessee Volunteers have held on in double overtime as the Vols rally to win it 42-41.
Running right, Marshall on the option, running, throwing, flipping it, caught. It's Benson. Does he get across the goal line? They say incomplete. Incomplete on that last-ditch flip.
That's the ball game.
And Tennessee holds on in the second overtime.
We had a which is which there, didn't we, Slick?
Yes, we did.
I think I can tell which one the Tennessee call and which one the Georgia Tech call was. All right, Dog fans, I want to throw it over to Hugh in the next segment and get his take on Jake Browning. What, am I missing something?
Yeah.
Oh, is it a 2-page montage?
Yes.
Oh, there's 2 Major League Baseball cuts. I didn't even see this. We can't leave out. Well, let's just do one of them because J.D. Martinez has got to be played.
And the 0-1-0 pitch. Martinez, another drive. He's done it. 4 homers in the ballgame for J.D. Martinez. He's tied a Major League record. That went into the left field bleachers, scoring Pollock ahead of him. And J.D. Martinez, a part of history tonight here at Dodger Stadium with a 4-homer ball game, and even some of the Dodger fans are cheering here at Dodger Stadium.
Incredible. And only 1 home run going into the 7th, and he ends up with 4 bombs. And Dodgers struggling a little bit. It's funny, both of these teams, Dodgers and the Astros, which in mid-July everybody is saying, well, that's going to be your World Series, Dodgers and Astros. Well, the Dodgers and Astros have not played good baseball since then. Now, they're still got a great chance to be in the World Series, but they got
a good time to do it.
Pick it back up.
A big lead on everybody.
That's true.
Kind of cruise and get it all out of your system now.
That's right.
2 records I'd love to see before I die. I'd love to see somebody get 5. How many have got 4, isn't it? 13
18.
or 15? 18?
Yeah, he's the 18.
Love to see somebody get 5, and I think DiMaggio's record in some ways is just the most, I don't know, elusive record in sports. And I think if a guy were to run after that thing,
that would be awesome.
I think that the sports world would. I remember Pete Rose got to 40, I think 44 when I was a kid, and he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated for doing so.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously 12 away, and I now this is a different age with media and what have you. I think if that were to happen now, the whole world would be, or at least the whole sports world in this country, would be so connected to that player.
Absolutely. Well, it was like that.
If he was pushing, if he gets past 45, if somebody were to get past 45, I mean, we'd all be together. I think 300 million American sports fans would unite, and they'd be breaking into. I wouldn't be surprised if they broke into the network on once he got.
Of course, well, it would
low
be
50s.
It would be very similar to what we saw in '98 with Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa. I mean, everybody knew when those games were, and they were following when those guys came up to the plate. But it would be incredible.
Well, the difference in that one is you're looking and saying, okay, what's the pace he's on? He's got 182 games, and you don't really know the date. You know, if a guy were to really take a hit string to a significant end, you'd be sitting there saying, okay, he's got to play. Well, I suppose a guy could pull himself out of the lineup, Mm-hmm. So in that regard, I stand corrected. But I think there's a certain finality to it. You either got to do it today or it's over. Whereas the home run, you could, in theory, you could go 2-3 weeks. You could go 2.5 weeks and be in a slump and not hit one at all, and come back and hit 4 or 5 within a series and get yourself right back into it.
We got Pete Carroll in the 7 o'clock hour. We got Greg Bell as well. Hugh's got something to say at 7 o'clock straight up on a Tuesday morning. Welcome back to the grind, everyone. This is when it really starts, right? The beginning, the day after Labor Day. That's when the grind starts. But fortunately, we've got football. We've got football to get us through. And we'll be talking plenty of football between now and end of January. Let's hope into February. We've got NFL starting Thursday evening. We got the Seahawks and Packers on Sunday afternoon. We got the Dogs playing again on Saturday, their first home game of the year. Plenty going on. You'll hear from the coach, Pete Carroll. You'll actually hear from both coaches. Pete Carroll coming up in about 12 minutes after we talk to Greg Bell with our Seahawks at 7. You'll hear from Chris Peterson in the 9 o'clock hour as well. What's going on in the world of sports? Real quick, the Mariners lose to the Astros, but do not lose ground in the wild card race. Still 2.5 out. Felix Hernandez threw 37 pitches in his bullpen session yesterday. D-backs J.D. Martinez, the 18th player in Major League Baseball history to hit 4 home runs in a game in a 13-0 whitewashing of the Dodgers. Le'Veon Bell reporting to Steelers camp. He signed his franchise tender, and Andrew Luck ruled out for Indianapolis on Sunday. Scott Tolzien will get the start at quarterback. Here we go with little Greg Bell.
Yes, breaking news. Get out of your mind. Get out of your mind. Get out of your mind.
We just talked about the grind starting for everybody, Greg, that they're making their way to work for the first time. The grind started for you a while ago, right? When does the grind, like beginning of July, is that when the grind starts for you?
Well, Dick, July 31st, first day of training camp, is the official end of summer for the Bell family, at least this part of it. Yeah.
You say goodbye to the kids, and you're like, hey, we'll see you in February, bye.
That's pretty much what it is. Yeah, the grind. Yeah, it'll be at the Seahawks facility at 8 p.m. on Labor Day. Kind of hits home that the grind is real.
Absolutely.
That's part of the job.
And we're going to hear Pete Carroll talk in just a moment, so we won't talk a lot about what he had to say, but I do want to the news and notes of the day. The practice squad was announced, and maybe any surprise that Trevon Boykin wasn't picked up by any team, or did you kind of expect him to come through and be a Seahawk still?
No, I think I expected that. The Seahawks put up with a lot of his inconsistencies and the struggles that he had even in practices last year because of his athleticism and ability to make plays. And Pete Carroll really valued that, and they thought that last year was a nice change to have a backup quarterback who did the same thing that Russell Wilson did in extending plays and getting away from pass rush. Now the Seahawks have gone back to more traditional, experienced, I think I can trust this guy for one game quarterback in Austin Davis, a guy who started in the league. Pete Carroll did say that he praised John Schneider for being able to keep both Boykin and Davis in the building by doing what he did and putting Boykin on the practice squad. So all 3 quarterbacks are still there, but yes, no doubt, a demotion and a much, much smaller role for Trevon Boykin right now.
Anybody that made the practice squad that you thought, he might get picked up somewhere else?
Not really. Maybe Mike Davis, the running back, had some time with the San Francisco 49ers and played in a few games last year for them before they got him off waivers this offseason, just because he had game tape, real NFL experience game tape. Garrison Smith as well had 3 games last year with the Seahawks as defensive tackle. Someone else they claimed off waivers. When you get guys that are going through waivers, young guys, first or second year, that have game tape, a lot of times that teams will take flyers on them. But no real surprise. 8 of the 10 are guys the Seahawks cut on Saturday. All the draft picks are accounted for on the team. Darbo made it, and David Moore, the 7th-round wide receiver, is on the practice squad. Things like Mike Tyson is on the practice squad. Things like that.
Anything we know about the 2 newcomers to the practice squad, Austin Calitro and Jerron Jones?
They're both undrafted rookies. Calitro is from Villanova. Jones was a defensive tackle at Notre Dame that the Giants turned to offensive tackle this offseason when they signed him as an undrafted free agent, and the Seahawks look like they're going to start there and keep him on at offensive tackle, but that's about it.
Well, the Seahawks loves those defensive tackles that they can turn into offensive
Yeah, they've
line,
done that
right?
a time or 3, that's right.
They certainly have. Now, explain it to me like I'm the village idiot here. I saw Alex Collins signed to the Jets practice squad. Is my understanding that, when somebody comes off your or somebody gets grabbed from your practice squad or from your team and goes through waivers, they have to be signed to the active roster, but he got on the Jets practice squad. So how does that work? How do you get someone else's player through into your practice squad where you don't have to sign them to your active roster?
Well, then that means that he went all the way through league waivers without anyone claiming him. And then it becomes an open bidding for practice squad. There's even a mini free agency for practice squad where practice squad salaries count towards salary caps. And usually it's a few $1,000s, a couple $1,000s a week during the regular season to those guys. But you can give them more. And if you want to keep a guy, for instance, who gets an offer from another team, then you might be able to up the ante and say, well, we'll pay you $10,000 a week instead of $5,000 or whatever it is.
I see.
So that's apparently in the case that Alex Collins got more practice squad money per week from the Jets than he would have from the Seahawks or anyone else.
Any more roster moves before Sunday? I know it's totally impossible to completely predict, but you've been pretty good at coming on your Twitter and coming on the paper and say, I think this might be happening, and sure enough, it does happen. So are you smelling anything over the next few days?
Well, first of all, thanks for noticing that I have something of a track record. Yes, the possibility is very real. I thought it would have happened by now, to be honest with you. Though a lot of moves that happened since Saturday, 1,100 free agents went around and those kind of things. I thought maybe the Seahawks will have signed someone since Saturday by now. The 53rd guy on the roster is Isaiah Battle, the offensive tackle that they traded for from the Chiefs on Saturday. Pete Carroll said yesterday we're going to start him working on him at left tackle where he was with Kansas City, but they think he can play both sides, of right and left side. Mm-hmm. But they are constantly on the lookout for linemen, especially offensive linemen. And I think they're still probably looking at wide receiver because they only have 5 of them. And if Tyler Lockett can prove that he's back fully and can return kicks, which they're not sure of yet that they think he'd be able to play against the Packers, but Pete Carroll hedged and said that all the guys that went on the Regenikine circle last week, they're going to wait till Friday to be sure. If Lockett comes back and proves he can return kicks after this Green Bay game, then J.D. McKissick becomes an extra piece that they're going to have to decide whether they want to keep the whole time. They really do like him, but if Lockett returns kicks all the time, then McKissick's an extra piece, and you still may have 5 wide receivers.
And before we hear from Pete, Greg, he gave a little bit of update on Malik McDowell yesterday.
He did. He said that McDowell is going to be in and out around team headquarters. He said they will not ask him to do anything physically. No demands on him is how Carroll put it. So now what it means is that instead of being in Michigan full-time recuperating at home, he's now going to be at least around the team headquarters. Carroll said they want him to get him used to reporting for work and those kind of things. He's as detached from the team as he could possibly be right now, so they want to bring him in at least a little bit. But Carroll underscored that they do not have any idea when he's going to be able to play football. It still sounds, and all signs are pointing to him being out the entire rookie season and maybe into 2018. Carroll said he had nothing new to report on the injuries. I've done some digging, Dick, on this whole thing and with some authorities back in Michigan, and I haven't written the story yet. But this is a very, very well-covered-up injury. Nobody has reported anything to anybody of public authorities. The family has kept it closely to themselves, and the Seahawks have honored that, which is why no one knows the details of it at all. But the bottom line is Malik McDowell will at least be around the team, nowhere closer to playing at all.
Bizarre and unfortunate, no question about it. Greg, you aren't bizarre, and we're not unfortunate to have you. So thanks for coming on. We'll talk to you tomorrow, all right?
Thanks. I have one more thing to tell the listeners, because it was interesting to me, just so everyone knows, Thomas Rawls is nowhere guaranteed playing at Green Bay yet. I thought it was very interesting that Carroll said we got to see him complete practices on Wednesday and Thursday to know. He's, of course, been out for a couple of weeks with a sprained ankle, so it's just peculiar to me that he didn't come out and say, yes, Rawls is going to play on Sunday.
That would add a little more intrigue, as if you needed more intrigue for a game at Lambeau Field. Eddie Lacy, the starting running back against Green Bay. Wouldn't that be something?
Yes, sir. That's a possibility right now.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it. Greg Bell from the Tacoma News Tribune. Tacoma News Tribune. There you go. If I can spit it out. Now we go to Pete Carroll. Yesterday, he talked about the Thomas Rawls, but how about the biggest acquisition of the offseason for the Seattle Seahawks, Sheldon Richardson?
Well, our guys have done a lot of homework on him. Clint had background with him in recruiting him. We had players that played on that team. We did all of the research we needed to do. I know that he's had some issues in the past, but he has withstood the test. I think coming back and righting the ship, and he's done a really good job. Teammates think a lot of him. Coaches think a lot of him, the way he works and how he brings it to the game. So I think he fits in. He's very aggressive, up-tempo player and guy, and I think he's going to fit in great.
Hugh, when you watch Sheldon Richardson on film, obviously the Seahawks played the Jets not that long ago, and I'm sure you've seen him at other times as well. A, what stands out, and B, how do you think he fits into
Reminds
this?
me of Cortez Kennedy, just a big guy who's athletic, carries a little bit of a gut, but that doesn't hurt him. I think that kind of helps him anchor down. But good motor and I think versatile. I think he could play a few positions along the line. If need be, he could be popped outside. But I think he's probably at his best in that 3 technique outside shade of the guard. So, an elite player. He's an elite player when he wants to be, and a Pro Bowler, and had a terrific rookie year in 13. Pro Bowler, getting 8 sacks in 14. Dropped off a little. Some questions about whether or not he was motivated. With the team decline, like the Jets have fallen off, and so now he gets a great situation to be playing around 7 other Pro Bowlers. You'd have to expect the best from him. I mean, it has to be. You cannot use a second-round pick on a guy in his 5th year in the league, and then all of a sudden it doesn't work out.
Right.
You got so much more homework on an NFL guy than you do a college draftee. And so this has to hit. I expect it to hit, and it's going to be fun watching that defense now. It's going to be back and forth with the offensive line, and then just the joy of watching the defense. It's going to be at CenturyLink games. There's something about defensive football. You're more involved. Offensively you have to hush.
Right.
Oh,
I love when the defense is out on the field.
You get to
It's the
play.
best.
You get to play defense.
Yeah.
And so this has an ability. They went 4 straight years, led the NFL in scoring. They dropped off to 3rd. Big falling off a cliff from 1st to 3rd, but they have a real chance to get back there.
How difficult was it to cut Kason Williams, Coach?
Certainly. He's a great kid. We love him, and you could tell our players love him, and so these decisions are extremely difficult and they're excruciating at times based on the experience and the time we spent together and the guys that we're dealing with. But there's a lot of stuff that we take into consideration, a lot more than any one aspect of the process. Kason had great games and did a beautiful job for us and did well. But other guys did really well too in the rest of the process to add to it. And we have to make decisions and see how it all fits. And sometimes you lose guys that you hate losing, and that's a great case of it. I was talking to him all the way up until he got claimed, and hoping that we could get him back, and maybe we will someday.
Excruciating, the word he used, it has the same root as crucify, and so it's about as strong a word as you can have in the language in terms of the anguish that he has. And I think in Kason, I think that sounds sincere, as certainly as sincere as you can be about a guy that you cut. And it had to be the hardest, both from a play standpoint and maybe from a personality and how hard he had worked. So I believe him. I think he was sincerely affected by having to make that cut. All these guys are. If they're good people, it's going to be hard on that day. You get a little hardened to it, but I hope coaches never get entirely hardened to that process.
But you did hear from the 12th man. I mean, they came out in full force. I wouldn't say, I'd say outrage is too strong a term, but they were definitely concerned that the Seahawks got rid of a guy that could really help them in their wide receiver core. Do you believe that the Seahawks got rid of a guy that could really be a factor for them, or did they get rid of a guy that he's a fringe NFL player that they really can live without?
They can certainly live without him. I understand the decisions. We talked about that yesterday, and he's not an elite player. Just doesn't make it any less difficult.
Mm-hmm. Talking about Reese Odiambo stepping in a left tackle. Here's the coach.
He has responded. He's responded well. He's settling in quite well. He's still young for us, and going to continue to be a guy that we need to look after. Do the things that you do to take care of a young tackle. But we have high expectations. He's really come off the ball very well in the running game. His pass protection is fine. We just got to try to eliminate the miscues that can occur, the misreads and stuff like that when the calls that can put him in a bad situation. In the right situation, he can hang and pick guys up really well and do a nice job for us.
What's your comfort level right now with Odiambo?
Minimal.
Okay.
Minimal. Yeah.
What was your comfort level with George Fant in beginning of August?
Minimal coming in, but once I saw him in that Charger game, I thought he played really well, and he showed himself. I still expected him to struggle against some really good competition, but I think he had made big strides, and so it's deflating. But you could press me and get me to say, really, Fant was really that much more perceived to be a top flight left tackle in this league than Odiambo, and you might kind of paint me into a corner on that one. But I think the tackles are the biggest concern on the football team. I'm actually more concerned about Fetty on the other side.
Austin Davis, your backup quarterback.
He had a great spring in camp. He did an excellent job. Most importantly, we wanted all three guys here, and John did a great job to figure out how to get that done. So to have Trey back with us and that room kept together, that was well done.
And you mentioned, I think it was Friday, Hugh, that don't think that they don't have that game against the Rams in the back of their mind when Austin Davis beat them and played pretty well in doing it.
Yeah, real well. He had the highest passer rating of any game in his career, 17 of 20, I believe, a couple touchdowns, no picks, and pretty good yield with his yards, and found a way to beat a Seahawks team that at that time, I mean, you go 17 for 20 and win. Not a lot of quarterbacks are doing that.
Against that defense, particularly.
Yeah, I think that was the 14 season, if I have it right. But, that was a Super Bowl year.
Yeah.
And for a young guy to have been able to be that efficient against them, it definitely made an impression that helped him.
That was the game in St. Louis that they did the fake punt at the end, and they had the two guys back on the punt return. So. I think that punt return touchdown, and they did the fake punt at the end.
The throw, yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah, the Bothell kid threw it out in the left flat, yep.
Jeff Fisher. I can't stand Jeff Fisher. Starting right guard looks to be Mark Glowinski.
That looks like it. We go into this week with that thought. We'll see how the week pans out, and those guys are still battling. They'll continue to compete throughout, and O'Day did a nice job.
Glowinski versus Ibushi there.
Right guard.
Yeah, right guard.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I thought Glowinski at the end of training camp kind of came on. Mentioned that a couple of times that he had played well the third and fourth game. Well, probably not the fourth game; it was the third game. But not surprising. But that was a spirited battle, and I think Glowinski just when he went out there, he just played with a nastiness, and I thought his feet were light, getting around. I can see how that happened.
And finally, J.D. McKissick. Why was he kept?
He's got a versatility that's really unique, and to go along with that is what he did in special teams. He made tackles downfield. He returned the balls for us and gave us the confidence that we could put him back there at any time, in any situation. And he played receiver and he played running back, and particularly in the third down situation. So there was just so much versatility there that we had to take note. I really would accentuate the fact that his plays in special teams were unique, and special made tackles inside the 15-yard line twice, and with good energy and good toughness and all that stuff mattered. It mattered a lot.
Is he a guy, Hugh, that his spot on the roster is going to be dependent by the health of Tyler Lockett?
Possibly. It depends on other injuries. For me, it's odd to say this. He's wearing number 37, which, of course, Sean Alexander's number, and he's a running back. He had wore number 14. My focus on the jersey number is that there's a feeling there that if you have him in a running back number, now when you split him out, you're more likely to draw matchups that are favorable. I do believe, however, when I was watching him in 14 and started talking to Mitch about this guy early in camp and really kept a keen eye on him, it's my conclusion, having been around camps and played with a lot of receivers, that had somebody believed in this kid early on, I think he could be a wide receiver in the NFL. I think, not on every team's, you think of a course. Think of, to underscore this point, let me go to an extreme. If Kurt Warner hadn't had Dick Vermeil step up and have something, Kurt Warner said he had the worst workout of his life when he worked out for the Rams. And it was his last, he was dying for the phone to ring. It finally rang, and he worked out for the Rams. He just called his wife and he says, I was horrible. On to the new thing. My point in saying that is that there are guys, and it's not just the Kurt Warners of the world. There's guys out there that have to have somebody believe in them. Mm-hmm. And, now Calvin Johnsons don't need anybody to believe in them. Everybody's going to believe in them. I mean, Julio Jones, those type of guys. But there's way more guys at all the various positions that, maybe they bounce around and somebody just says, I tilt my head this way, and I kind of like how that guy runs routes. I kind of like his physicality. I think he has soft hands. He doesn't fight the ball. He finds a way to make plays. There's a toughness to him. I think that he could have played 6-8 years as a wide receiver. Put him in number 85 and have that career. Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But my point in saying that is he's one of the more versatile guys we've seen in a Seahawks camp for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. When you say that he can be lined up at running back, that if I'm right, he can be a legitimate NFL wide receiver. He's both a kick returner and a punt returner. Those are two different skill sets, but he does them both capably. And I kind of like his. There's a ferocity be too strong a word. He's too small of a man to be ferocious, but there is definitely an intensity and a willingness, almost an eagerness to participate in the physical side of the game. And for a guy in that position,
that doesn't always happen.
Well, you saw it all through summer. This guy has no fear in anything he does. When hand him the football, catch a football, run down on a kickoff, return a punt, return a kickoff. I mean, he's ready to put his face in the fan no matter where you ask him to play. And, that's not the most important thing, but in a guy in this position, it makes a statement, and it helps the football team.
J.D. McKissick has a fan, and Hugh Breedlove Millen. How about that? 723 on 950 KJR. Daily Schnoz, we are going to go to Indianapolis and check in on when is Andrew Luck ever going to play a game. Le'Veon Bell in Pittsburgh. He is back with the Steelers and ready for week 1. And also, how about the 4-home run day yesterday for the Diamondbacks? J.D. Martinez will go to Phoenix as well. Daily Schnoz coming up on 950 KJR. 728, the Daily Schnoz. A couple of NFL stories, including looks at two very, very big stars in this league. One in Pittsburgh and one in Indianapolis. And then we'll talk about J.D. Martinez, who hit 4 home runs in Phoenix yesterday against the L.A. Dodgers. But first and foremost, Ray Fittipaldo, our friend from Pittsburgh, the Post-Gazette, joins us to talk about Le'Veon Bell. How you doing, Ray?
Good morning, guys. How are you?
Doing great, man. 1,268 yards last year, 7 rushing touchdowns, 616 more receiving yards, and a couple of touchdowns. This is the Pittsburgh. I mean, it's not that Pittsburgh doesn't have other weapons on that offense, but boy, you're talking about almost 2,000 yards, and they got him back yesterday. How close are we to seeing Le'Veon Bell at Le'Veon Bell level, or is this holdout going to cost him 3 or 4 weeks as far as getting him back up to speed?
No, I don't think so. I think he's going to be ready to go on Sunday. He reported on Monday morning, signed his 1-year franchise tender, and then he went out and took what he called his normal workload in practice. And that was every rep that the first-team offense took in practice. He was out there for. So if you look back at his history, guys, he missed the first 3 games of last season while serving a drug suspension. Came back in week 4 against the Chiefs, and I think he had 144 yards rushing. So he keeps himself in great shape. He's been away from the team before, and it hasn't affected him. I do not expect this to be an issue on Sunday. I would expect him to be in the starting lineup, and I would expect the Steelers to use him as they have in the past.
He did start slow last year, though, right? I mean, looking at his game log, you mentioned the 144 yards to start on October the 2nd, but then it was 66, 53, 81, 32, 57, and then the last, 6-7 weeks of the season, he was absolutely unstoppable.
Yeah, I think that was more of a mindset with the team. The second half of the season, what they were doing in the first half of the season wasn't working. I want to say they were like 4-4 at the midway point last year before they went on that run. Actually 4-5 before they went on that run to win the division. So once they were committed to running the ball, Le'Veon Bell just had a torrid second pace. I want to say he averaged nearly 150 yards rushing over that final few weeks of the season. So if they have a similar mindset this year, I think he can do similar things. But you have to remember, you do have All-Pro Antonio Brown, and you have Martavis Bryant coming back into the fold this year, and they're going to have to find a way to make everyone happy. But they certainly know they can lean on Le'Veon Bell if need be.
What are Steeler fans saying as far as expectations this year? What would anything short of a Super Bowl a failure for Steeler fans, or they have a little more reasonable expectations?
No, I think if you look at the past 3 years, 2014 they made it to the wild card round, 15 division round last year, AFC Championship game. All the starters on this team are experienced. A lot of the guys who are going to be in key positions on this defense have a year under their belts now. So it's Super Bowl or bust this year. And if you look at the wheelings and dealings of General Manager Kevin Colbert in the past week or so, that'll tell you the story. I mean, I think they're going for it this year. They went out and signed Joe Hayden. They're going to pay him $7 million this year. They wanted to shore up their secondary. They went out and got J.J. Wilcox 2 days ago to shore up their back end as a safety. So everything they're doing points to the fact that they think this is their year, and they're trying to do everything they can to match up with the Patriots.
And they seem to be in a division to do that. I mean, I don't think, Cincinnati's had their decent teams in the past. Cleveland's still rebuilding, although probably better than last year. And in Baltimore, I mean, they just keep getting ravaged with injuries year after year. I mean, it really seems like Pittsburgh with a bullet in that division. Who do you see as the biggest competitor?
Baltimore, to me, you mentioned the injuries, and they've been decimated by injuries. But, since John Harbaugh's come onto the scene, he knows how to play the Steelers well. They always seem to play close games, no matter what the talent level is on either team. So, for whatever reason, the Steelers have the Bengals number, and the Ravens play them really hard. So until I see otherwise, I'm going to say the Ravens are the top competition in that division. But I agree with you. I could see the Steelers going 12-4, and the second place team, either the Ravens or the Bengals, not being all that close, maybe 8-8 at best, 9-7. I think this is the Steelers' division to win, and I think they really have to go after home field advantage this year if they want to have a shot to beat the Patriots, because they've had a heck of a time trying to beat them up in Foxborough.
Is this Ben Roethlisberger's last year?
He hasn't committed beyond the season, so I think part of the reason they're loading up this year is, they take him at his word. He's going year to year on his contract. He's got 2 more years after this one. But listening to him in the past 6 months, it's a little bit different. He mentioned on the first day of training camp that his wife wouldn't mind if he retired. She's worried about the concussion issue in the NFL, so it very well might be. Even though he has 2 years left, I think the Steelers are loading up because of his approach to this year-to-year contract thing.
Interesting. Well, Ray, who knows? We might be talking to you in Minneapolis, Minnesota at the end of the season on Super Bowl week. That would be fun, wouldn't it?
I'll bring my winter coat. How's that?
There you go. Sounds good. Thanks, Ray. Ray Fittipaldo, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, would not be out of the realm of possibility. Seahawks Steelers, it's happened once before in a Super Bowl, could happen again. Let's go to story number 2.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press. Smash.
The Daily Schnoz.
Jeff Scott, our friend from Phoenix, the Arizona News Network, and boy, what a sight last night that you were able to witness with J.D. Martinez, and it didn't look like a special night for J.D. Martinez until very late. I think that's the most intriguing part of his 4-home run night, Jeff.
We thought the big story last night was going to be Robbie Ray. He took a perfect game into the 6th inning at Dodger Stadium, and it was looking like he was going to be the headline of the day. The Diamondbacks have really owned the Dodgers their last few contests after the Dodgers really have owned this rivalry the past couple of years. But, his last 4 at-bats, J.D. Martinez, also known as Just Dingers Martinez, hits 4 straight home runs, and really looking like a huge pickup for this team. They got him for a couple of prospects in midsummer. He's hit 18 home runs since coming over to the Diamondbacks, and of course last night a performance for the ages.
Well, Jeff, we've been focused here in Seattle, at least our baseball eye has been focused on the Mariners trying to stay desperately in that wild card race, which seems like it includes almost every team in the American League. The National League's been much, much different this year. The National League has been the haves and the have-nots, and Arizona has always been a have this season, but really lately playing unbelievable baseball. Why have they rattled off 11 straight wins and been the hottest team in the National League second half of the season?
Just what you would expect. I mean, a combination of hot hitting and outstanding pitching, and that's what's really done it these last few weeks. I mean, they were really concerning their fans in the early part of July. They kind of had a stretch where they just weren't doing either. They were getting lit up from a pitching standpoint, and they weren't hitting in timely situations, and all that good that they had gotten off to with the big start in the beginning of the season and really challenging the Dodgers for the lead in the National League West looked like it was going to go by the wayside, and they were going to drop off and be another disappointing team. But in the last couple of weeks, they've just been unstoppable. They were swept in Minnesota, and then they went on the road to New York and took 3 out of 4 from the Mets and haven't lost since. They haven't even been behind in a game since August 25th. So that's almost 90 innings where they've been ahead. So they are by far the hottest team in the National League. And if you're the Dodgers, a team that looked like they were just going to be just steamrolling through the regular season and into the playoffs, this is probably a team you don't want to face because they've really had their difficulties against them. You have to figure that Robbie Ray would probably be the game 1 starter with Zach Greinke going in a wild card matchup against Colorado, who they lead by 6.5 games, and things are probably looking pretty good for the Diamondbacks. They have to have a lot of confidence right now. One possible hitch in the get-along right now is Paul Goldschmidt, their star first baseman. He went back to Phoenix last night for an MRI on his right elbow, and it's just been giving him a little bit of pain the last couple of weeks, and there's concern, obviously, anytime you take a look at something that seems to be a nagging injury, that it could be the sign of something a little more serious. They're hoping that he will be back with the team later today and maybe in the lineup tonight, but you never know.
I'm wondering which team you want to be going to the playoffs. I mean, now, obviously, a lot can change between now and when the playoffs start, but let's just say this were the last week of the season. Would you rather be the team in the Diamondbacks that are 22 games over but have won 11 in a row, or the team that's, 37 games or 47 games over 500 in the Dodgers that's 1-9 in their last 10 games? I mean, which team do you want to be going into the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you take a look at how the Dodgers season has played out, and, as I mentioned, I mean, up until a couple of weeks ago, it didn't look like anyone was going to stop them. I mean, they were setting records left and right. But at this point, if you're the Dodgers, you're probably talking to yourself a little bit. I mean, it has to be a situation where, at what point do you get back on track? And at what point does it become not just a slump, but maybe a collapse? Now, with a month left in the season and a 12.5-game lead in the division, most likely they're going to be the division champions unless they just completely stop winning ball games. But at the same time, as you mentioned, you want to be hot going into the playoffs, and the Diamondbacks are definitely on a hot streak, and the Dodgers look like they've derailed.
Hey, great stuff. Thank you very much, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Anytime.
You bet. That is Jeff Scott, our friend from the Arizona News Network. Story number 3, we'll check in on Andrew Luck and his status for beyond Week 1, because we know he's not playing in Week 1 this weekend. Coming up next on the day.
Today, we salute you, the loudest fans in football. You shout with Hawks pride from the clink and from your couch. You'll be shouting even more when you score big at Lucky Eagle Casino and Hotel during the $64,000 fantasy football kiosk game. So head over to Lucky Eagle, pick the pros, and score the cash. Then check out Craft House Sports Bar, where you can yell at our TVs. All 20 of them. Must be 21 or older and a Players Club member. Details at LuckyEagle.com.
Here's another late development.
The Daily Schnoz.
Interesting developments in Indianapolis, and it's kind of been clandestine as far as what's gone with Andrew Luck over the last month or so. And John Michael Vincent from 1070 The Fan joins us in Indy. Why all the secrecy, first of all, John, and as far as Andrew Luck and his status and exactly how serious his injury has been?
I can only equate it to this. It's just the NFL's way, and I guess it's more the way of the Colts right now. I mean, everything's got to be cloak and dagger, and you got to phrase things. I honestly, Chris Ballard, I like, by the way, the first-year general manager. This was on Thursday, that final preseason game, when asked about Andrew Luck coming off the PUP, said all indications are. This is on Thursday. Why don't you just say it's on Thursday? All right, he's coming off. We're going to wait till the absolute last minute until about 3:45 to make the announcement. Listen, it's silly. I mean, it is beyond silly, but it seems like it is, for the most part, the NFL way, and I just think the Colts are going by the NFL way.
What do you think? Andrew Luck makes his first start this season when?
I mean, I've said this for like a month. I got a timetable that, worst-case scenario, a month ago told me that he was going to miss the first and second games of the season. Now, granted, anything can change over the course of this progressionary work or plan or routine, whatever he's doing, trying to work his way back. But my timeline that I was given to me would mean he'd be ready to come back 2 weeks from tomorrow, tomorrow being Wednesday. Listen, I don't know if this has changed or not. I trust who gives me this information, but it looks bleak in my eyes, because there are a lot of people now that are suggesting it's going to be longer than that. But I'm going to go ahead and ride this until it bucks me. I'm going to say he makes his debut in Week 3 against Cleveland. I might be on an island, however, making that call, because not a lot of people believe in.
Most people, including myself, just thought this was the greatest number 1 draft pick in a long, long time, that he was going to be a perennial Pro Bowler. He was going to win Super Bowls. He was going to take over for Peyton Manning and lead the Colts to greatness just like Manning had. And it hasn't really turned out that way. I mean, he's been very good, but he's got a career passer rating of 87.3. I mean, that is very, very mundane. What has been the main reason that Andrew Luck has been just merely good instead of great?
Well, he has dealt with some of the worst rosters ever, for one. And let's get this straight here. He's not Peyton Manning. I mean, he wasn't going to be Peyton Manning. People around here made that connection, tried to say, well, he's going to be better than Manning, because when you pass the torch with a year in between like that with so-called great quarterbacks, that's the type of reaction you're going to get from the fan base. But I always thought Manning was, on the highest level, and Luck is going to be very good. And I think he has been very good. I mean, the first 3 years, you're surprisingly make the playoffs. Second year, you win a playoff game. Third year, you go to the AFC title game. But let's face it, this roster has been terrible. Ryan Grigson has done a terrible job of putting it together. That's why we find ourselves right now where we are here in Indianapolis, looking at this roster and the mess that Chris Ballard is trying to clean up. And listen, Chuck Pagano is not going to remind anybody of Vince Lombardi anytime soon either, frankly. So there's been really little to nothing that he has had to work with. Chris Ballard said when he got here back in February that it had to be more than just Andrew Luck. And still, it is all about Andrew Luck. They're trying to build that for the future. For 5 years, it has been nothing but Andrew Luck. And you can kind of see why he is health-wise where he is and why this organization is where it might be right now, too, because they leaned way too much on that quarterback who's very good, but ultimately, he's not going to be Peyton Manning, and people should have realized that from the go.
Still a winnable division, although a lot of people like the Tennessee Titans. Do you consider the Colts as the favorite in that kind of 9 wins might get it done division, or do you think Tennessee has surpassed them?
No, I think Tennessee back in May to win. I think it's Tennessee's time. You know, the one hurdle that Tennessee has to get over is the Colts, because they've not been able to beat them no matter who the Colts roll out there at quarterback. We have seen the past couple of years. They're the most significant hurdle. But this year, it's going to be a lot different. I mean, I picked this Colts team to win 7 games from the outset, and I'm going to ride there. I think they might be lucky now, the way that you look at it, even with this bad schedule, to win 7 games, especially if my prediction or what I'm told of week 3 is not the return time for Andrew Luck, because let's face it, Scott Tolzien. I mean, that's the other thing, too. I mean, this organization really, you're going after a backup quarterback, on the weekend prior to the start of the NFL season. Why didn't you address the backup quarterback situation long before that? So now you got to start the season with Tolzien and whatever. You know what's funny around here, honestly, with Manning and Luck, I've always said this. I've always said, who cares if you don't have a backup quarterback? Because if they're not out there, if Manning or Luck's not out there, you're going to lose. And that's kind of how it's played out. I mean, Matt Hasselbeck 2 years ago got them on a run, but you know what? They still finished 8-8. Who cares? Yeah. I mean, seriously, Manning and Polian put the bar so high here about what should be done and where you should win that you go 8-8, and that's a bad season.
No,
and they've had back-to-back 8-8 seasons.
And that's been the Seahawks' philosophy as well. I mean, who have the Seahawks had behind Russell Wilson?
Hey, I'll be honest with you. If I were a fan, I would want that to be the philosophy of my favorite team.
Yep.
The team that I paid for tickets, disposable income to go see, bought their gear. I would want that to be the philosophy. And unfortunately around the NFL, for a lot of fans, that's not their favorite team's philosophy. So I get it, but I mean, let's face it, back-to-back 8-8, and you had Matt Hasselbeck 2 years ago. What did that get you? You still sat at home in the postseason.
Exactly. John Michael Vincent from Indianapolis, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
You got it, bud.
You bet. That's the Daily Schnoz here on 950 KJR.
Well, that's the news. I'm out of here.
The Daily Schnoz, brought to you by Michael's Toyota of Bellevue on Sports Radio 950 KJR.
Slickhawk tells me that Jermaine Kearse is going to be next, that he has addressed the New York media and talked about his memories of Seattle, his thoughts of leaving Seattle, and what it means to him to be a Jet. God, Kearse with the Jets and Kaysen with the Browns. NFL purgatory. Coming up next. All right, so we're going to the Big Apple, huh, Slickhawk? Here at 7:51. And our old friend Jermaine Kearse had a little sit-down with the New York media. Welcome to New York, Jermaine Kearse. A little bit different than it is out here.
There's a couple guys that, Austin Severian Jenkins, I played college football with him. Stringfellow, who's also here, UW guy too. So just, get to know these guys and just build those relationships and take it from there.
Sorry if you've been asked this already, but what are your early takeaways from the offense? I know you've only been here 2 days, but have you seen any similarities to a system you've been in before?
Yeah, it's very similar, just different names to concepts and formations. So just got to get familiar with those and just kind of try to put 2 and 2 together and see if I can just learn it faster that way.
What about going from a team that... Jermaine, can you do me a favor and stand up just so you can get shots? What about going from a team that was talked about in terms of having a realistic Super Bowl chance to a team that is now in more of a rebuilding phase? Is that...
I mean, I'm not here to compare Seattle. I'm here to work and do whatever I can to help this team win. That's all I'm focused on.
And how about the leadership role that they look to you for?
What's going on there, Slickhawk?
Just get to know these guys.
I think I know what happened.
Foremost. Just build that
let's
relationship
bail out of it, shall we?
And let the leadership role just come
natural. Did you listen? You didn't listen to it ahead of time, evidently.
No, I put it. No, what happened was I put it in during the schnoz, and the new phone system. Sometimes when you dial out, for some reason, I guess takes over one of the audio.
Well, it took over. But we heard enough of Jermaine Kearse. I don't need 4 minutes of Jermaine Kearse. I love he dropped the. I played with Austin Seferian Jenkins and DeMaurier Stringfellow with the Huskies, which he did, technically. They call Husky fans are like DeMaurier Stringfellow.
Well, now they're his teammates.
Lord, yes, they are. I'm envisioning what the season is going to look like for Jermaine Kearse when he goes from a Seattle Seahawks offense with one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the NFL throwing to him to Josh McCown or Christian Hackenberg? And when you already, Hugh, have a tough time getting off the line and getting open and getting separation, if you don't have pinpoint accurate quarterback getting you the ball like Russell Wilson. I mean, Russell Wilson threw Jermaine Kearse open quite a bit here in Seattle.
Yeah. No, he did. And, I have they determined a starting quarterback?
Right, for week 1, I believe it's going to be Josh McCown. But Christian Hackenberg and Bryce Petty have been working with. But I think for week 1, it's Josh McCown.
Well, the Jets have had a $68 million salary dump, and they're clearly rebuilding. So Jermaine, he's going to be in a little bit different role. He's going to be a guy who's going to expected to have some leadership, and because he has a Super Bowl ring, that's one of the things that gives him value. I remember playing on the Cowboys, and that team was just gutted. 92, 93 won the Super Bowl, and then all those guys had more value because they had been exposed to a culture that was perceived to be the right culture. And right now, Seattle has been so successful over the last few years that they do, value a guy that has played in there. So it has the potential to be a long season for him, both personally and team wise. But ultimately it could work out.
Their starting wide receivers for the New York Jets, with Josh McCown thrown to him, are Robbie Anderson, Jermaine Kearse, and Ardarius Stewart.
Mm.
That is your starting wide receiver core for the New York.
I mean,
that team might not win 2 games this year.
Well, most of his completions come on zone. Mm-hmm. He far less of his completions come on man-to-man. Not to say that there weren't some good completions against man-to-man, but we'll see how they play. Sometimes teams they play 8 in the box and they get up and press you and they just load up defensively against the run and kind of dare you at the line of scrimmage to beat them in the passing game. And that may happen due to the receiving core and the quarterback.
What's going on in the world of sports? We'll get you the top of the hour headlines, and then Hugh has something to say, as he always does at 8 a.m. Fact or fiction, your opportunity to win $1,000 comes up at 8:30 today. Chris Peterson in the 9 o'clock hour, as well as the great debate as we continue on 950 KJR. 8:01 on 950 KJR, rolling into the second half of the show here. Our thanks to Greg Bell for joining us in the 7 o'clock hour. You heard from Mike Holmgren, so a lot of Seahawks talk in the 7 o'clock hour, which is, I'm assuming, what most people want to hear about out there. But we've got a little Husky talk in. We will hear from Chris Peterson at 9 o'clock today. Hugh's got something to say here in a couple of moments. First, we'll get you caught up with what's going on in the world of sports. And good news and bad news from the Mariners' standpoint. We'll start with the bad. They lost to Houston yesterday in a game that was competitive, really, until about the 7th inning, when the Astros hammered the Mariner bullpen. Final score of 6-2. That's the bad news. The good news, and there's quite a bit of good news, actually. 1, the Mariners did not lose any ground in the wild card race. They remained 2.5 games out. 2, Felix Hernandez threw 37 pitches in a bullpen session yesterday. 3, James Paxton is throwing as well. 4, Hisashi Iwakuma is throwing as well. And wouldn't that be something, Slickhawk? Wouldn't that be something if with 10 days, 2 weeks left to go in the Major League Baseball season, and the Mariners were like 2 games out, and you could throw out a starting rotation of James Paxton, Felix Hernandez, Hisashi Iwakuma, Mike Leake, and Erasmo Ramirez.
Well, it'd be better than what we've had.
It would be a heck of a lot better than what we'd have. And you actually, we would be sitting here going, we got a shot here, man. If they were 2 games out with like 12 to play, and you had that rotation going 2 times through before the end of the year?
Let's just see where we're at after this.
I know.
Hopefully 7-2 homestand.
I understand I'm in the vast minority, but I've been believing. You have to. Can you not applaud my faith all season long? Look, I've had more faith than you. I've had more faith than just about anybody out there.
You know I want it. You know I'm rooting like hell for it. You know that.
I know. Mariners made a couple moves yesterday as well. They picked up an outfielder from the Royals, Jacob Hanneman. Picked up a right-handed pitcher from the Cubs, Seth Frankoff. So if he pitches, I believe that would be pitcher number 41.
Woo, that's a record.
On the season for the Seattle Mariners if he ever were to get into a baseball. Yeah, there it is. Le'Veon Bell reports to the Steelers. We went there in the schnoz. Andrew Luck ruled out for Indianapolis on Sunday. And Slick, I think it's time to find out what Hugh has to say today.
You want to know when the kicker's kicking really good?
When
he's banging the cameraman at training camp.
When he's banging the cameraman. The floor is yours, my friend Hugh. The floor is
do you
yours.
understand the banging the cameraman reference?
Well, the people that were
Mitch
listening
does.
at that time understand, but I don't know if the
Do
people...
you, do you know as you sit here?
Yes.
Do you understand
Oh,
that?
yeah. I knew exactly what you were talking about, because when you originally said that, I was on vacation.
Yeah, okay.
But the first time I heard it replayed,
right,
I knew exactly what you're talking about, because the camera sits right behind the goalpost, and if you're hitting the camera, you hit the cameraman.
It's right in the middle, right?
You're splitting the uprights
Yeah, exactly.
with those
You're
kicks.
splitting the uprights,
I
exactly.
got it.
Yeah,
I got it.
But
Still
sometimes,
funny, though.
sometimes those cammy guys, they're on a high tower, way up at the top of the uprights, maybe 10, 12, 15 yards behind. And, they're obviously looking through their lens, but sometimes it's incoming when those kickers are drilling at dead center. Those guys can take some shrapnel coming off the foot of those kickers.
I don't know. I'm not necessarily afraid of heights, but, we've seen some bad situations with those big, tall cameras on ladders. I remember the Notre Dame situation a couple of years ago that was deadly. So I don't know if I'm getting up, especially in a windstorm. I'm not getting up there. There's no question about that.
Okay.
So what do you got to say today?
Well, I think it'd be interesting to talk about Jake Browning and just kind of where he is, from where he came, where he's going, and what have you. He's a delightful young man. I was about to say kid, but he's old enough to get carved in a war, and so these are men. He's a man, but a sweetheart of a guy. At least the impression that I get. All the conversations I've had, just very genuine, humble guy. It came from Folsom High School. When you watch tape of Folsom High School, they won the state title. They beat Oceanside 65-7 in the state title. And this guy had 92 touchdowns his senior year. Why am I bringing this up? Because how he was taught at high school, I think, was pivotal to kind of his quarterback development. Taught by a guy named Troy Taylor, who played for Cal, went on to play for the Jets, and is the current offensive coordinator at Utah after a one-year stint at Eastern Washington last year, where he ripped it. So he was Troy Taylor's high school coach, and now has made his way to the college ranks. The way they were taught was a lot of their routes had a lot of leeway, and this is almost the topic. I feel like I could read an encyclopedia on the whole thing, because it's fascinating, the concept of whether wide receivers have adjustments in their routes. For example, the run and shoot offense. Do you remember Mouse Davis?
Mouse Davis,
okay.
yeah. Warren Moon played it.
Yeah, and I actually started a couple games in that.
In Atlanta?
In Atlanta, yeah. Mike Leach's system. There are some systems where they're giving the receivers a great amount of latitude. And, for example, on a situation where you would not have latitude, where you're a slot receiver, you're inside guy, and you're going to go down and you're going to run an in route. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, some situation where they give you latitude, they say, well, you can run an in route if it's against man. If it's against zone, you can do a curl. If it's too deep, you can run a post. If it's single high safety, you can run through the seam if you feel like you can beat them. But if you don't feel like you can beat them, then still sit down and throw your hand up and sit down in that spot. So now all of a sudden the same route has 4 or 5 different routes. So Browning played in a system like that. They had a great offensive line, and he was taught to use his eyes. That even though he wanted to run a concept to his left, he was taught to first look to his right, put his eyes over to the right sideline for no purpose at all other than to move defenders. And he had an offensive line that allowed him to do that. And so when you watch the mechanics of him and his ability to go through progressions, he was taught at a young age to keep those feet moving and to be able to have his shoulders and his hips aligned to look one side of the field and then come back on the other. So he comes in and he starts. He has a brilliant year last year. Of course, sets the Husky record for passer rating at 167. That college is different than the pros, but is the Pac-12 Player of the Year. But now at the end of the year, he separates his shoulder, and he had a pretty significant surgery. I had the same surgery back in 1992, and what it is your collarbone goes from your center of your chest, your sternoclavicular joint, and then it attaches to the top of your shoulder joint, the AC joint, and it detaches there, and then if it gets separated enough, they actually cut the collarbone and then tie it down with the ligament. So that's not insignificant surgery for Jake to have had on the heels of that 2016 at the end. Everybody talked about his arm strength and what have you. So now you're looking keenly, does he have the arm strength?
Right.
And he's never been a guy that really has that hose. He just has this tremendous accuracy. The built-in ability to distort the defense with the eyes, to help guys open, and trained at a young age where he comes back and he's so marvelously centered in his balance mechanically, and then with the great accuracy, just has a feel. It's just a very easy way about his quarterbacking style. The NFL, I don't think right now is going to covet him wildly. He's not, going to be a top 5 pick of the draft. He's smaller. He has questionable arm strength by NFL standards, but his quarterback acumen is so high. So the other day in Rutgers, feel free to jump in if you have any questions or thoughts. Or
I will
after
you're rolling. I've got plenty after you're done.
Yeah. So now he of course doesn't have John Ross, and it was a little bit frustrating last year. I think he's limited in how far he can throw. He can't throw it 70 yards, but he can throw it far enough that some of the memorable highlights to John Ross, the Cal touchdown where Ross circled around, the interception of Adoree Jackson where he had John Ross wide open against USC, and Adoree Jackson came back into the play. He's capable of throwing it far enough. He just has to get it up a little quicker when he's throwing to those fast guys. Of course, he doesn't have John Ross this year.
Because we've seen Ross many times have to wait for the ball.
And it's not a... you say, well, he outran his arm. Jake Browning doesn't have the arm to get there. I don't buy that. Just get it up quicker. It's real simple. You can mess with the splits on an outside go route. You say, okay, be mindful of the splits. How wide is the quarterback? The receiver from the quarterback. If he's really wide, you better get it up quick. If he has a reduced split and he's in tighter, you can afford to take a little more time. But on these post routes where he underthrows, he's coming into the middle of the field. Just do the math. You remember the old term, the hypotenuse of the triangle. On a go route, you're throwing the hypotenuse of the triangle. On a post route, you're bringing it in, so it's far less of a throw. I know he's got the arm strength to get that out there. He just didn't time it up. It's really, really hard to time up a guy that fast. I mean, imagine if you were going to go out and throw snowballs out in your front yard, or out in the front street. Well, hitting the stop sign would be the easiest thing to do, right? Well, uprooting the stop sign and putting it in the back of a pickup and going, relatively slow would be easier. Well, now put it, attach it to a Lamborghini and try and hit it when it's going, 90 miles. It's just harder to hit it because your brain has to process. So it was a case with John Ross where he missed some go routes. But for him to come back and hit just a beautiful post route to Dante Pettis at a time where they kind of needed a big play, he aired it out there and just I remember in the Cowboy quarterback room, we had Norv Turner was the coach, Troy Aikman was a starter, and Jason Garrett and I, and the term we would use is walk it to him. Now, I was going to say Troy, but his nickname was actually Roy. For whatever reason, the Cowboys called him Roy, not Troy. But, so you heard often, walk it to him, Roy. It was like that meant the perfect throw. And that's what Jake Browning did on that post route to Dante Pettis. Pettis, certainly a fast receiver. I think
fast enough to beat most guys in the Pac-12 on go routes?
He's a 4.4 guy.
Okay. With size.
But he's not a 4.25 guy.
Right.
But with technique, you saw he didn't have that ability to just separate the way John Ross did. Nobody does. But it was a gorgeous throw, and he comes out of the game with, I think I mentioned 167 passer rating. I think it was closer to the 150s the other day. It was 158.
Mm-hmm.
And so for
which
a game
in college football is
the NFL passer rating for him. If you just so he was.
I think people understand
17
the
for
NFL
30.
passer rating
He was
better.
17 for 30 for 284 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks.
Okay.
The 4 components of the passer rating: completion percentage, yards per attempt, and then you have interception percentage and touchdown percentage. And for both the NFL and the college passer rating, they use the exact same 4 components that I just mentioned. They just mix it up in the chili sauce a little different and add a couple multipliers and what have you. But it's the same 4 components. But the NFL passer rating for him the other day was 111, which
good.
would be a Seahawk record, by the way.
If you were to
Russell
do it for a
Wilson's like
season.
110 and change if he were to do it for a season. So it didn't feel like he had a great game. In the end, maybe his 2 best passes were a wheel route and then a corner route to I'm sorry,
Gaskin?
Yeah,
In the
yeah,
corner?
Gaskin.
Yeah, it was great.
Gaskin up the sideline, Miles
Beautiful.
Gaskin, and then the corner route. Yeah,
and the touchdown
beautiful.
pass.
Yeah.
Now, there's a couple of passes
I
that
was thinking of Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
And I said, you don't say Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett does not play halfback for the Huskies.
There were a couple of passes near the goal line that were getting criticized a little bit. I'm blanking on the color commentator's name from the game. He does a
Gus
nice
Johnson?
No, the color commentator. He does a great job.
Joel
yeah,
Klatt?
Joel
Yeah.
Klatt. I think he does a very nice
Yeah.
job. Former Buffalo, right? I think he played
Colorado. Yep,
played at
Colorado quarterback. Yeah,
does a really nice job. I like when those two guys call the games. And he was talking about a couple of those. Doesn't fire it into Chico. Likely cost
kind of floated him.
You likely cost the Dogs 4 points because they had to kick a field goal there. Chico catches that at the 2, turns up. He had a guy there, but he might have been able to get in. And then secondly, another ball that you could call it lazy, but before I think it was intended for or right before the Gaskin touchdown catch. So he had a couple there at the goal line he could improve.
It's funny you mentioned that it cost him 4 points because I've always used this term. Softy have vouched for this for decades. And before I even knew Dave, I call there's certain times in the game I call, this is a 4-point play, and what strikes me, I sense that fans aren't really locking into this because the stadium doesn't have a sense of it often. If you're going for 2, there's a certain animation level that you sense within a stadium. You say, oh, wow, somebody's going for 2. And yet if you have 3rd and goal from the 5-yard line, that's a 4-point play. Whoever wins that play has a net 4 points. Stating the obvious, assuming that it's an automatic field goal. If the defense wins, they're going to get 3 points out of that sequence. If the offense executes on that 3rd down, they're going to get a touchdown, and obviously the net 4 points. So I call it a 4-point play, and what Klatt was describing, when you have a slot receiver, an inside receiver breaking to the out. Whether you're trying to get a pick or whether the outside guy's running a fade to clear things out, either way, if you get a chance to drive that quick breaking route to the flat, you gotta just stab it right on his shirt and let him be a playmaker. But if you float it, then now
he's got no time because he's catching the ball as he's getting
it
hit.
as the defender's getting there, and certainly for a playmaker like McClatcher, you do want to just hose that thing out there. And so I think there was. Had in that instant, had you doubled Browning's velocity and he just put it right 12 inches in front of the numbers the way Bill Walsh likes it, would have he been able to score? Who knows? I thought it was pretty good coverage in that situation, but maybe he would have. Maybe he would have been right.
He just would have needed to make one little wiggle, though. And McClatcher's got the wiggle.
Yeah. So, I don't think it negates the point made by Klatt that you do want to zip it out there a little bit with a little bit more velocity. But at any rate, it was a I don't, I think for him it wasn't a spectacular start, because he had such a great start a year ago. But he's not going to find himself at the top of the Heisman list right now. That's probably Josh Rosen. But it was serviceable. I don't think the Huskies are going to be happy with a 56.7% completion percentage. He did throw some things away, and he got hit when throwing, and so I think it was just kind of a little bit of a.
He didn't have as much time as I thought he was going to have.
No. And he got more time in the second half. It kind of mirrored what the run blocking did for him. But, getting the arm hit and some of the throwaways that he had early in the game, tossing it out of bounds. It's the right move because it's the only move, but it's kind of an indicator. If he rolls out and everybody's covered and he faces a little pressure and he has to throw it out of bounds and then you punt, you just kind of feel like, Have
you seen development either over at Husky Stadium in camp or in game one? Have you seen something that says, he's progressing there in that area that I didn't see last year?
Well, they're working on the deep ball, and he doesn't have to try and time up the John Ross. Let me make sure I made it clear. Any problems he had throwing John Ross and underthrowing those balls, I don't think it's because he can't get it out there. I think it was just a little late, or he processed it. It's just hard to get yourself to throw to a guy that fast. And you think, well, your brain is almost calculating, okay, if I throw that post out there that far, there's no man alive that's going to run that thing down.
But there was
one
of them.
Yeah. And, it's just so what ends up happening is you kind of back off. It's kind of like that's – in some ways, it's a little bit why golfers want to lay up on a par 5. They don't want to be 50 yards out. They'd rather be 80 yards out. Mm-hmm. You can just air that thing out. And for him, just timing up his feet so that he could just, give it a good chuck. That's something he's got to improve on. And that post route to Dante was a good sign.
What's next? Like, where is the next step in the progression that we, as kind of the novice football observers, can watch over the next? I'm not going to say just the next 2 games, because what are you really going to learn from Montana and Fresno State? But let's say the next month, where you got a couple Pac-12 games in there as well. What can we look for in Jake Browning's progression where we can say, I remember Hugh back on September 5th said that's exactly what we should look for Jake Browning?
Well, I'd say continued accuracy in the deep ball. Mm-hmm. I would say, when you're talking about the highest level of quarterbacking, the highest sophistication, kind of 500 level quarterbacking, in my opinion, you're talking about eye manipulation, using, really looking off. Again, he's been trained to do that, right. So I think that comes natural to him getting to a sequence. Throwing with anticipation, being able to squeeze balls into tighter windows because of anticipation. If you don't have that blistering velocity, be able to anticipate, particularly in zone coverage. The primacy in man-to-man coverage is accuracy. The primacy in zone coverage is anticipation. It's not just, I don't want that to be inferred that, you don't have to be accurate in zone coverage, but you can kind of anticipate a guy coming in a hole and throw it early, and then when the receiver turns, he can make an adjustment because there's not a guy draped on him. Mm-hmm. Whereas in man-to-man, a lot of times if you got a good defender, he's right in the hip pocket, and it can be unnerving depending on the direction. If it's an out route or something, you say, okay, if I throw it too far out ahead, it's going to be an incompletion. So, but the worst thing is I could throw a little bit behind. If I throw a yard behind, then now the defender makes a break on that ball, and if it's to the sideline, it could be a pick six. So, he's got that innate accuracy. I'm not worried about that. But anticipation in zone, guys can always get better than that. Getting in and out of good play, out of place. There's times the other day where I would have liked to have seen him audible and get out of some running plays that just look doomed. And I'd love to see him have the green light where he just backs up, has a couple hand signals, and goes after man-to-man coverage. Those safeties are down within less than 10 yards from the line of scrimmage, and the corners are out there pressed.
Yeah. And you've got an All-American candidate wide receiver out there?
Yeah. To me, I would just say, hey, it's my play. I would, excuse me, let me say, I would ask him to, in his mind, think, hey, it's my play. I'm taking this thing, and give him the green light to do it. Give him the confidence to do it. Find a handful.
Why
of routes.
doesn't he have the green light? He's been the starter for his third
year.
year.
He should, but I don't want to go through the mechanics. Whether or not it's something where they say, hey, lock the play and go with it, or what have you. But when I see a play where there's just too many defenders and they're gummed up in the running game and they're teeing off inside the boxes, I'd rather have the ball go out to the perimeter and try and make some plays outside. So I think that calling the game is a sign. Certainly, think of Peyton Manning. Let's think of an extreme example. One in our mind's eye we can all think of a guy that's really dedicated to getting to the very best play, whether it's a run or a pass. There's always those situations. That's kind of the upper level quarterbacking is some of those attributes, and I don't think anybody stops growing in that regard.
So the synopsis today of Hugh's Got Something to Say is not only a kind of a retrospective on what Friday night looked like from Jake's standpoint, but also looking ahead and what's next for him, right? And what does he need to do?
Yeah, I think it was just a lot of people are looking at Jake Browning. He was sixth in the Heisman last year?
Yes, that sounds right.
Was he sixth?
I think it was.
And he's on a lot of Heisman watch lists, and we haven't talked much about him in the last couple of days. No, I would doubt he would, but you can't say that.
No, not with full certainty. I can't. But
he's
not going to put up the numbers to win the Heisman.
Yeah, I doubt he would, but you never know. They get hot.
You got to throw for $4,000 plus and 45 touchdowns, and you got to put up ridiculous numbers.
You got to put up ridiculous numbers or be extremely efficient on an undefeated team. You got to be, it's possible you could do that, but yeah, it's not just efficiency, but it's volume.
Luke Falk's got a better chance of the Heisman just because he will throw the ball 55 times a game, and he will have a couple games where he throws for close to 600 yards, and those are the eye-popping numbers that he looks at.
Well, the Cougars would have to have a heck of a season win-loss wise. They'd have to be
at least
in the running
wins,
right to the end. They'd have to be well past Halloween, have to be in the running to win the Pac-12.
Yeah. Because then he's on the list. Then he's on the leaderboard. That's what you need to. You need to be on that Heisman leaderboard at come Halloween.
Yeah, and then he'd have to come in and probably light up the Huskies to get it.
Yep. 8:25 on 950 KJR. That's Hugh. He's got something to say. But we got coming up in the next segment is our fact or fiction. Slickhawk gave you a pick yesterday.
Yes.
I'm going to give you a pick today. I feel good about a particular NFL game. I'm going to give it to you coming up in the next segment, and then you will have 12 minutes to text to 49451, either fact or fiction. Is my pick a fact? Is my pick going to be fiction? And you think I'm full of crap? It's your opportunity to win $1,000 and get on the board to winning $10,000 by the end of the year.
That's not what we're calling it. What we're calling it a cubic butt ton of money.
The
EQC's money.
The EQC. I saw $23,000, Slickhawk. If you add up all the money,
yes,
13 weekly prizes of $1,000,
which on the metric system is a cubic butt ton of money. From the EQC.
I can't believe they're giving us that much money. It's beautiful. 826 on 950 KJR. Here we go. As promised. I think I'm going to like this segment on a daily basis.
Of course you will. It's right up your alley.
Oh, God, it is right up my alley. I'm a degenerate gambler in the sense that I love picking games, but I'm not a degenerate gambler in the sense that I put a ton of my money on said games.
You're a degenerate gambler without the degenerate part.
Well, I'm a degenerate gambler without the big money part. I just like to. I love handicapping. I love looking at games.
So
I love kind of breakdown and okay, how do I think this game's going to play out, and then see if it plays out that way. And this is exactly what fact or fiction is.
Yeah.
Now, how are you and I going to do our little wagering? And
between the two of us?
Yeah, between the two of us. And then how are we going to do our little wagering between the morning show and the afternoon show?
Well, the morning show and the afternoon show is just on who has the most facts.
Okay.
So I said yesterday that Army is going to beat SUNY Buffalo
SUNY Buffalo
and cover the spread of 16.5. And if they cover, then that's a fact for us. And so we get a little point against Softy Show. Now, it's been suggested by the morning show that we put up 3 shows for this competition. And so the winning show, the other show would host 3 of their shows. So if we win, Softy would come in and host 3 morning shows.
Well, that's your idea. Have you checked with Dave Softy Mahler on that?
I haven't, but we have his representative right here.
Have you checked with Kevin Shockey on that? Hey, there's Kevin Shockey right there.
I don't like your chances on this one, guys.
What's wrong with that?
On making that bet, that is.
Have you checked with me on that yet?
This is what we all talked about last week.
All right. One question, though, and I think Shockey might be the best person to answer this question. When we're doing this contest, it says here that the morning show and Dave Softy Mahler will make a pick based upon an upcoming college or pro game. And then in parentheses, it says either against the spread, straight up, or the total. Well, if Kevin Shockey picks 20 games straight up for a 10-point favorite, he's going to end up with a lot better overall record than if Slickhawk picks 20 games against the spread.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Weak.
Yeah. So
that's kind of weak.
I mean, that's a weaselly way to win.
We are all competitive enough that nobody is going to make all straight-up picks. You know that, and I know that.
Shockey's going to take Bama to beat, like, FIU this week.
I think there should be some sort of
rule. I really like
them
against Mercer in Week 12.
I think there'd be some sort of rule that if you're doing a straight-up pick, it's got to be like a 3-point spread or less.
I think we should get rid of straight-up pick.
I agree.
I think it should be all against the spread. I mean, as far as over
FYI, once the official contest rules go out, we don't make changes.
No, but we can make changes internally to what we do.
That's true.
Just because it's an option, it doesn't mean we have to take it.
I think Shockey and everything he stands for is weaselly. That's what I think.
Right.
All right.
You're late. Make a pick.
You're a weasel.
Here's the pick. Slickhawk. Scott Tolzien is starting for the Indianapolis Colts.
That's true.
Jared Goff is starting for the Los Angeles Rams.
I give the edge to Goff.
The over-under, Slickhawk, is 42 in that game. I am trying to close my eyes and envision, outside, obviously, of a pick six or a punt return, which, the return touchdowns, those screw with the over-unders. But let's just say there's no pick six, there's no fumble returns for touchdowns, there's no punt or kickoff returns for touchdowns. It's just a straight-up game. I'm trying to envision how Scott Tolzien and Jared Goff can lead those respective offenses to more than 42 points. So I am taking the under in the Colts-LA Rams game.
Can't see them getting 20 points each in an NFL game?
Well, they'd need 23-20 to get the over.
Right.
I don't see it happening. I see it as just an ugly slugfest of a game where Frank Gore tries to run through the line for 2 yards on one side, and Todd Gurley Todd Gurley has his typical 25 carry for 68 yards. And why do I know that? Because I had him on my fantasy team last year, and he was absolutely wretched. So that's what I like. I like Indianapolis and LA with the over. So all you got to do right now is go 49451. The clock is ticking. You've got 12 minutes from right now. Am I full of crap? Well, if you think I'm full of crap and you think the game is actually going to be a higher scoring game than that, then simply text fiction to 49451 if you think my statement was fiction. If you think it was fact and you agree with me that it's going to be a low scoring game between Indianapolis and LA in week 1 without Andrew Luck, then text fact. And you get 12 minutes to do so. We're going to be doing this every single day at 8:30 on the morning show and every single day at 3:30 on the afternoon show. Our thanks to the Emerald Queen Casino weekly prize of $1,000. That is a random entrant will be selected at the end of each week. But keep in mind, every time you text in, and you have a total of 10 chances to text in, 5 days times 2 picks a day. Every time you text in and get one right, that's essentially another entry that you've submitted for yourself for that week and a better chance to win $1,000. And everybody that competes has a chance to be the grand prize winner. But in order to be the grand prize winner, you got to text in a lot.
That's true.
Because somebody's going to be texting in almost every day, twice a day, all season long until we wrap this thing up on December.
And you will have a lot of texts on your phone, too, because I've just been told in my ear, a little voice appeared.
Yeah?
It was like the voice of God. But
what did they say? What did God tell you?
It was a little bit higher pitched than I imagined God's voice to be. If you do text in 49451, you will receive a bounce back text just letting you know we received your text. That's right.
Hey, how about that? We're advancing in the world.
A little bit.
All right, 8:39 on 950 KJR. More of Hugh Breedlove Millen, Chris Peterson at 9 o'clock. Great debate at 9:30. All coming up in the final hour and 20 on the big show on 950. We'll hear from Chris Peterson coming up at the top of the hour. Great debate. Slickhawker, you're preparing an award-winning debate segment.
Well, they all are. It just depends on which award do they win. I mean, some of it's a good award. You know how they make the Razzies for like the worst movie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've probably taken a couple Razzies.
Yesterday's was pretty good. I give you a solid B+
Thank
for
you.
yesterday's.
It was almost all off the top of the dome, as it turned out.
Yes, it did.
You know what we have though today?
What's that?
Showdown questions.
We can do that today.
Well,
we got to. I read the showdown questions. I need more time to.
I haven't really read them.
I read them.
I just saw that there were some.
I did read in that email from Chuck Powell that we have a particular show that is rallying. Let me just read you
We're making a move.
Let's read you the email from Chuck Powell sent yesterday. And here they come in bold lettering. After a dreadful start, the defending champs are on the rise.
Oh!
Thanks to two shows being hit with a -5 for predicting a Kyrie Irving return to Cleveland, along with their own +3 for being closest to the pin with this weekend's Husky Coug combined point spread, the Mornings have moved out of last place and are knocking on the door of second place.
You don't say.
Yeah. Don't bury us, because we're not dead yet. Long way to go. But yeah, I want to wait, though. I think maybe tomorrow, Thursday at the latest, for the showdown questions. We'll get to them, because I need some time to think about them. All right? But what I was thinking about yesterday, and I want to bring Hugh into this conversation.
I at least know what I want to do with the short term. I know that.
Maybe we can do one of them. How about we do one today and we'll do one tomorrow? All right? We'll do that. I was reading yesterday, now that the rosters are set, Hugh, in the NFL, I think it's interesting. Some people like this, some people don't care, but I think it's interesting to take a look at how much money is being spent by each team and where it's being spent. Because I think everybody's got this impression that, well, football's not baseball. We understand in baseball there's no salary cap, and there's some teams spending $200 million on their payroll. There's some teams spending $45 million on their payroll, and there's a whole bunch of teams in between. Where in football, it's all about the same, right? Well, that's not right. The Washington Redskins, for example, are spending $172 million on their top 51 players on their team. They are number one. The San Francisco 49ers are spending $32 million less on their top 51. They're spending $140 million. They have got in cap space $63 million left over. And the Seahawks are towards the bottom. The Seahawks they have about $5.5 million worth of cap space. And I wanted to see position by position where they're spending this money. The Seahawks on offense, there are only a handful of teams that spend less than the Hawks on offense, and they are teams that do not have very good offenses. San Francisco, the Jets, Miami, Houston, Cleveland, and Tennessee, the only teams that spend less money on their offense than the Seahawks. The Seahawks ranked 26th. Mm-hmm. The way they break it down, I was actually kind of surprised. Quarterbacks, the Seahawks are only 15th in spending on quarterback in the NFL. That is how, when you take a look at Russell Wilson's contract, it is so cap friendly. It is exactly what we wanted to see. Remember, we were talking about it before Russell Wilson. And I remember saying, I think you said it as well, you can't be one of those teams that goes above and beyond and gives your quarterback a boatload of money, i.e. the New Orleans Saints, giving Drew Brees $30 million because it costs the rest of your team.
For years, he was the number one cap hit.
And look what's happened to the rest of their team. And Seattle has given Russell Wilson a good contract, but nothing that kills him. They're 15th in quarterbacks. They actually spend more on their running backs than they do on their quarterbacks, at least in terms of rankings in the NFL. They're 13th in running backs, 28th in wide receivers. Jimmy Graham obviously makes them third overall at the tight end position. And then again, Hugh, and I want to get your take on this, again for what, the third straight year? Or just the second straight year? Dead DFL in spending for the offensive line, 32nd. When is that ever going to change?
Don't know. Now let's go through the defense in more detail.
We will.
For the, no, I'm saying right now. Do
okay.
you have that in front of you?
Yes, I do. Hawks spending obviously number one on defense. No one spends more money on their defense than the Seahawks, and they're one of only 5 teams that spends more than 50% of their total budget on their defense. It breaks down like this: the defensive line, 15th overall. That obviously bumped up with the Sheldon Richardson signing. Linebackers, 7th. And then, as people may figure, when you're paying Cam and Richard Sherman and Earl Thomas, they are the number one team in spending in their second.
Well, they have a interesting paradigm here, and I think they've kind of stumbled into it. And you say, well, they didn't stumble into Sheldon Richardson. They stumbled into Cam Chancellor being, the best strong safety in football. Earl Thomas, they created that because they used a top, what was he, 14th overall pick, right? Because Okung was 6th, he was 14th. They stumbled into Richard Sherman at the 5th. They on some level stumbled into Bobby Wagner in the second because anybody knew what Bobby Wagner would be a top 5 pick in the draft. So they did so well.
They stumbled into Michael Bennett too because nobody thought he was going to be a Pro Bowl caliber player.
Yeah, you look at all the big contracts. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't want to say stumble. I don't want to imply that you discredit them for targeting those guys, but on some of those, they just hit prodigious home runs. When you're talking about 5th-round picks being the best player at the position in the league. And so you had to pay those guys. You're not going to let them walk. Even KJ Wright, a 4th-round pick, is the most underrated guy that I think the Seahawks have had for the last several years, and he finally makes a Pro Bowl, but he's terrific. You had to pay him. You can't let him walk. And so now I bet on some level, I bet John Schneider would tell you that he stumbled into Sheldon Richardson because he said, how often do you get a chance to get that level of a player in the 5th year, and you only have to give up a second-rounder to do it? He said, I'm going to pull that trigger. I just can't. I just can't. I don't care. I don't care if the defense is getting paid twice as much. Really what you say is the amount of improvement of the team. Is it worth that resource? Well, I think you can make a pretty good argument that Sheldon Richardson is worth a second-round pick for a Super Bowl contender. Whether they, forget for a moment offense, defense. If you just say, how much better are you with Sheldon Richardson? You have the capacity to be a lot better. And there's no second-rounder that you could have traded for. But it still leaves that hole. It still leaves that hole in the offensive line.
I see all these assets being expended to help an already great, if not elite, defense, and we can parse the semantics on what's better, elite or great. To me, a great defense is a defense that's top 3 to 5 in the NFL. An elite defense is the best defense in the NFL, and maybe one of the best in over a course of 4 or 5 years. And I think the Seahawks are now back to that elite nature that they were in 2013 and 2014. But again, you got the effort or lack thereof on the other side of the football on the line, and I made kind of a snide remark on Twitter when I saw the Sheldon Richardson deal, to the tune of, that's cool. Can he play offensive tackle as well?
Okay, that is a snide remark.
And it's just because was I happy they picked up Sheldon? Sure. Was I fine with them trading Jermaine Kearse? Sure. Was I fine with them trading a second-round pick? Yes. But you're telling me that there's not any team in the NFL that you could have made a deal like that anytime over the last 2 or 3 years to pick up maybe not a Sheldon Richardson talent at tackle, but someone that was in a similar financial situation last year of his contract on a bad team where you needed they were looking to move a tackle or a guard that can also play tackle, and they've never we mentioned the term stumbled into it. They've never stumbled into a situation like that over the last 2 or 3 years. That to me tells me they're not really trying to stumble into situations on that side of the football.
Yeah, I think let me ask you this. If Seattle, let's suppose Sheldon Richardson caused them to drop 3 points per game. Just hypothetical.
Okay, that would be he'd be the defensive MVP then.
Yeah, you know, it's hard to isolate variables, right? I mean,
Right.
how do you know? I mean, how much is J.J. Watt worth?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know. I mean,
well, if you ask Vegas, they say, because the question's been asked when J.J. Watt was out, they adjust for the elite defensive players, and we're talking only about the top 5 in the NFL. They adjusted about a point. For the top, the Richard Shermans, the J.J. Watts, that they adjusted about a point.
Well, my point in saying 3 points wasn't to get you to. What I'm trying to get you to do is grasp the philosophy and then see if this situation applies.
Okay.
If in theory you got a defensive player that you're now 3 points a game better, and now you win games. Yeah, they're lower scoring, but that player impacted winning more than any other player. Even though now, let's say you're just mired in this ugliness, but you're so good on defense. You're so bad on the line. You're winning all your games 13-9, and it looks like hell from Mike Holmgren's lens. But Pete Carroll's a defensive guy. He loves it. He's an optimist. He doesn't mind that they're just a fumble, scoop, and score away from losing every game. But he just figures that's not going to happen. We're going to just win, and in fact, they do win, and they win these ugly games. Are you okay with just saying, hey, we're going to be so ferocious on defense, despite the fact that we are not funding that offense?
I would if you told me you've got an offense, a running game like you did in 2013 and 14, where you could hand a guy the ball and he was going to get you 1,500 yards and he was going to get you 12 touchdowns and you were going to be able to control the clock, pass when you need to. Yes, but you're not in that situation anymore. We don't even know who's going to get the most carries on this team by the end of the year. And we don't know if any of them are going to average over 4 yards a carry. There is no certainty in any of that. In fact, we heard Greg Bell say that we don't even know if Thomas Rawls is going to play on Sunday. And it might be Eddie Lacy starting against the Green Bay Packers. We don't know how long C.J. Prosise is going to be able to play out there. So because of that, you're going to have to rely more on your passing game. You only have 5 wide receivers on this team, and you got a quarterback that was injured last year because his offensive line couldn't protect him. And you're right in saying that, let's say a player can, on that defense, can bring the total points down for the opposition, but don't you think a similar type player, or maybe even a lesser type player at the right position at tackle on offense could do the exact same thing for that offense and potentially more, because he's protecting your quarterback from getting killed when your season's going to be over if that happens?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know that one player can do that on offense. I don't know that if you say, okay, take Walter Jones at his prime, how much does he impact a game more than Cortez Kennedy in his prime?
It's hard. It's hard to determine. I would say probably a parallel. I'd say probably equally. Yeah.
Well, if the Seahawks now, because of Sheldon Richardson, and I'm kind of blending in between theory and pragmatics, right? But in theory, if they're causing more punts, more 3-and-outs, okay, that somehow Sheldon Richardson comes in and he's just dominant and allows the LOB to take over because he can't run against them, and then now all of a sudden he's a dynamic inside pass rusher, and I'm just, let's say the best blue sky scenario we can think of with regards to the Sheldon Richardson acquisition. If you're then forcing more punts and affecting more field position, is the offense now being put in such a better position with more possessions, more
better
drives,
field position,
right?
Yep. No, I get you.
And not having to play from behind, But to your point in that situation, I agree with you, Dick. I think that that marrying that with, I understand it's 2017 and the impact of the running game is far diminished in the NFL, but by relative standards, if you can have a top flight, a top 5 or top 10 running game, then maybe that would philosophically seem to marry with a defense like that. But it's going to be fun. You can't deny this. It's going to be fun to be in that stadium, hooting and hollering for a defense that should be now. We've watched a lot of elite defenses, but they shouldn't be backing off whatsoever.
No, and we're starting with a great matchup, and I can't wait to break it down with you, especially like Thursday, Friday this week, breaking down two elite teams going at it. A great offense against a great defense. We'll talk about Chris Peterson. We'll talk in the next segment. Great debate at 9:30, all coming up in the last hour of the show on 950 KJR. Going into the final hour of the big show. Everybody's out of bed now, headed to work. Some people headed to school, even though my son doesn't start till tomorrow. Your kids in yet? Your kids in school today?
Yep.
Was today the first day, or did you start before Labor Day?
No, we started last week.
Oh, jeez. That I don't get, though, because with the whole Labor Day, you send the kids to school for like 2 or 3 days, and then you go on a 3-day weekend.
Out of my lane, Dick.
There it is.
It lets them ease into it.
Exactly. So, yeah, my son starts tomorrow. My daughter's kindergarten already for my daughter. That's amazing. She starts next week.
Don't blink.
I know. Mariners lose to Houston 6-2. That's the bad news. They don't lose any ground in the wild card. That's the good news. Make a couple of acquisitions because Jerry DiPoto can't go 48 hours without making acquisitions. They claim Jacob Hanneman from the Royals. He's an outfielder. Named the best athlete in the in the Royals system, but only 23rd ranked overall prospect. That's why Jacob Hanneman was available. Seth Frankoff from the Cubs is now a member of the Seattle Mariners 40-man roster. If he ends up pitching for the Mariners at some point in September, I think that makes number 41 on the season. Pitcher number 41 on this unbelievable season for the Mariners. Game 2, there it is. Game 2 of the 3-game series. Is my boy Miranda on the hill today?
Oh, I hope not. We need
Easy
to win.
on my boy. Let's see here. Who's on the hill today for the Mariners?
Can we get Albers again?
Ariel Miranda against Justin Verlander. How does that treat you tonight, Slick Hawk?
Until we get everybody back, can we just go alternate Albers and Erasmo?
Yeah, but the thing is, Albers is going to fall off the table. Erasmo is going to fall off the table. And then all of a sudden, Miranda, that's just the way it is with mediocre players. They go on hot streaks, and then they go on cold streaks. Miranda's been on his cold streak. He's going to go back to his hot streak. And Erasmo is not going to continue to have quality starts time in and time out like he did all through August.
On the showdown, we picked Ariel Miranda to have more wins than anybody on the Mariners.
Who does have the most wins?
James Paxton.
By how much?
He had a 6-win month.
Yeah, that did help.
I think he's got like 12.
And he's got no months, and he's got no wins since. Brutal.
Did he not pitch at all in August?
Maybe once.
Hey.
Maybe once in the month of August. What else is going on? Odell Beckham missed practice with his ankle injury. He is questionable for Sunday. Andrew Luck ruled out. Le'Veon Bell has reported to the Steelers and has signed his franchise tender. All right, so we talked to Little Dogs earlier on in the day, but we have not heard yet from the head coach of the Huskies. His weekly press conference was yesterday discussing Rutgers, discussing the game upcoming as well, and Chris Peterson addressed the team's slow start on offense on Friday.
I think the big thing was we got off to a slow start on offense, those first 2 drives, and then when their plan's going to be just to milk the clock and hold the ball, it was decent strategy when you're starting slow. We had the ball, I think, 23 plays in the first half, and we had the ball most of the fourth quarter. We still lost the time of possession game. I think it was like 21-38, something like that. So, that's fine. We'll win close, lower scoring games. But from our side of the, thing, we got to be more efficient on offense, start faster.
Why didn't they start faster? Was there any common thread that you saw in that first quarter that you think they can adjust on and change?
Yeah, I thought they were missing blocks. Particularly on the backside, away from the point of attack. They just weren't getting the backside sealed, whether they were trying to cut or whether they were trying to cut off and stay on their feet. When I mean cut is leave your feet or stand up. There was just one guy who was continually. I'm not saying one guy every play, in any given play.
Not the same player every
exactly.
play. Yes.
Yeah. They just had guys missing blocks, and big guys were flowing down the line of scrimmage and gumming up the running game. And so that's where I make the comment that I think Rutgers, they have slow team speed, and on either side of the ball, I don't like their fast guys, but I think their big guys are pretty good big guys. And they showed that for a good portion of that game.
And then specifically, he does talk about the running game starting sluggishly.
And it's probably playing live for the first time, and you get a little bit different, some different line game. Maybe, we knew there's going to be some adjustments, and we made some adjustments at halftime, strategy-wise as well. But the first game, they're going to come out. The problem is again, us not doing anything in those first two series. Then you get the ball 23 snaps. It's hard to adjust and get settled in when you have it that little.
So the overall carries for the Dogs, they only carried the ball 24 times. Let's take out Jake Browning's 2 sacks. 22 carries for the Huskies for 99 yards. So you're only talking just over 4 yards per carry. But it did look a lot better in the second half. Was it tempo or those missed blocks that they had in the first half? They got them shored up in the second half.
You kind of get a feeling, and when a coach uses the word games, a game is where you're twisting a defensive lineman, where one guy will pick, instead of just penetrating through the gaps or staying in your alignment, the defensive end might loop in and the defensive tackle might loop out. So stunts, games, those are some of the terminologies you hear from coaches. But they started doing more, gap scheming and where they're blocking down at the point of attack and pulling some linemen, and they had some situations where they're pulling both guards and Myles Gaskin, that seems to favor his running style, and so Gaskin had the far better game than Coleman. Statistically, he just found some of those creases that are developed when you have a lead blocker. You don't have a lead blocker in zone blocking, Dick, unless you put the fullback in there. But usually teams nowadays, they're doing zone block, and it's a single block enterprise, and the running back just has to kind of feel where that crease is as opposed to being behind, as I describe it, the wake of the pulling lineman.
I would think that you look at the carries for these. Myles Gaskin carried the ball 7 times in that game. Levon Coleman carried the ball 14 times. I would think that in Chris Peterson's perfect world, Gaskin's getting 20 and Coleman's getting 15 to 20, right?
I don't know. He hasn't revealed that. I mean, Gaskin's a starter, so you'd think he'd want to have the most starts, but Coleman's a guy that completely different body style, almost remade. He looked giant, he's pushing 230, looks great on the hoof, just big pipes, looks like a really physical NFL back. I'm talking about just how he looks. And then Gaskin's just, not only short, but really low cut. He's very short legs. His center of gravity is, just a great wiggler, but a tough guy, that really belies his size, and a great vision guy. And I mean, we've seen Gaskin style. You watch him walk onto a field in shorts and a t-shirt, and you would never, ever, ever have an idea that he's that good of a college running back. I see him kind of hanging around, just, whether it's high school practices or what have you, 7-on-7 games or something, and you just never ever believe that guy is a top flight Pac-12 running back, but of course he is.
On the pass protection, here's Chris Peterson talking about Jake and the touchdown throw to Myles Gaskin.
He got hit a couple times. The one time was more of a protection thing on us as coaches and getting Jake dialed into that. It wasn't an assignment bust or anything like that. On that nice throw to Myles Gaskin for the touchdown, he got hit on that one as well. A guy just kind of came off late. those are the throws that are really, really impressive to me. You know, you're going to take some of those. You're going to get hit and got to stand in there. And, I mean, that ball was about as accurate as we throw a ball. And Miles made a great catch. The coverage was really pretty good. And for a running back to make a catch over his outside shoulder in the side of the end zone and Jake to put it there, that was as impressive a play as I've seen in a while. So
when you look at schematically, when you watch a running back emanate from the backfield and run a corner route, okay, that's where he's going to come up. He's going to, in this case, Gaskin's aligned on the left. He's going to outside release, outside the left tackle, go up the seam. At that juncture, his threat to the defense, he can break to the flat. He can break inside on what's called a Texas route, a quick angle route. He can continue to go up the seam and really just kind of be window dressing for some other concept. But on that particular play where he is going to run a corner route, you know, some people in the old days called it a flag route, but when you're running to the corner, from the backfield, that takes a while to develop. And so what you're doing conceptually is the other receivers, the two receivers on the other on that particular side, they're creating clear out in one case and what's called a control on the outside receiver is doing just a control route where he's running a flat area to just hold the corner in that area called the flat near the line of scrimmage towards the sideline. And so it's not a receiver running the corner route. It's not a tight end. It's not a slot. It's, again, a guy coming from the backfield. So it just takes longer to develop. And I think coaches are reluctant to put that on a whiteboard and actually try and implement that because you're just looking to say, well, how long is it going to take? Mm-hmm. I'm bringing it up also mindful of the fact that the Falcons ran the same concept in the playoff game against the Seahawks. And it struck me as rare. Kyle Shanahan, of course, a little bit of an innovator, and that's why he got the 49er job, and he led the number one offense in the NFL a year ago. But they scored, did the Falcons, on that same scheme in that playoff game. And so, you know, just an observation that when Chris Peterson is talking about his quarterback getting hit, well, I think you start at ground zero, and I don't fault this is not meant to be a criticism. I'm just offering this as an idea that when you're drawing up plays as an offensive coordinator, there's a limit to the protection where you say, well, that'd be a great scheme. You know, there's a Dino route, for example, double in, you know, where you go in, you break to the corner, you go back to the post.
Takes a long time to develop.
Yeah, and you know, there's just some or deep angle crosses. You're going to motion the flanker down, and then we're going to go play action. We're going to go 7 steps, and we're going to get the flanker to go all the way over and create a weak side flood over on the opposite sideline. We'll clear out the split end to the boundary, and we'll motion that. And that Zeke, by golly, he's going to give us an 18, 20-yard deep over route, and we're going to slice it over right in over on the other hash mark. Well,
all
it
looks good
great
on paper, right?
It's great in 7-on-7, but you got to protect. And so there is kind of a, you know, think of the quarterback who has a built-in time clock in the pocket, you know, where you sometimes you get exasperated with your quarterback and say, come on, man, he's got to have that light on, you know, to know that there's not enough time. Well, I think the same goes for play designers. Mm-hmm. And
is that a common problem with the Dogs, you think?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. No. They have the confidence in their protection, and they will develop longer developing plays down the field with moves that are meant to be down the field, and they'll go get them, and they do a nice job of protecting. So this is not a criticism whatsoever. I'm just, again, offering you the notion that on the Gaskin touchdown, a running back running a corner route is something a lot of OCs, they'll just say, looks good. I love the clear out. I just don't know if my halfback can get there. And he did. And Browning got hit when he threw. He threw a great ball, and Gaskin, you know, 2 of Jake's best balls were just, you know, walk it to him throws, just dimes down the chimney on both a wheel route and a corner route to 5 foot. I don't know what he's listed at, man. I mean, there's no way he's above 5'8". I think he's a 5'7" running back, and that ain't easy. So
one time, Jake Brown did take abuse, and I'm sure Chris Peterson cringed about it. Here's him talking.
He's fine, though. You know, first thing he said to me, I was up in 2 seconds. So he's not going to, He's a tough guy, and you're trying to minimize any hits on him, but certainly those.
They didn't that time.
Yeah, I mentioned it's a real simple remedy. You got all of your receivers to the left. You got the halfback. You got a bunch formation to Jake's left.
Mm-hmm.
You got a halfback also set, which is building what we call a 4-by-1 formation as the defense sees it. Everybody's going to be flowing into the pass route on Jake's left. Of course, he's got a single receiver on his right. And so when Browning's looking to his left, when there's a linebacker we call mugged up, when you think of a linebacker depth, when he comes up and aligns in a defensive line position or in a gap there as a potential blitzer, when there's 3 guys to the right, again with all of Browning's hot receivers to the left, what you want to have is the center go to the right. You want the center to join the guard and the tackle, so you got 3 for 3 on that side, and now any 3-man blitz that's going to cause you a problem, that's off the left side, not the right. You want the 3-man problem to be on the left because you got 4 receivers.
Yeah.
You're looking at the concept developing with 3 to the left. So that's what Peterson's alluding to in terms of how they're going to sort that thing out. But whatever they do. Now, the other thing would have been if they're going to have the center go to the left, then you're going to have to be hot with the ex-receiver, a single receiver, run a slant or maybe a hitch if the corner's way off and have some type of side adjust. But whatever it is, you can't take hits like that. And I doubt that they will all year. I think that'll be the hardest hit that Jake takes all year.
You've talked about the physicality of the game and the physicality that Rutgers played with, which was much better than it was last year at this time when the Dogs just physically dominated them. Here's Chris Peterson on how tough a game it actually was.
Yeah, I thought it was. I mean, our guys play hard, and there were some physical plays out there for sure. I don't want to minimize that. I kind of thought that their backs were big and physical. They kind of fell forward more than you'd like them to see. Then you'd like to see that, you'd like to see the piles going the other way. And I think that'll just come with just more ball.
Yeah, that was surprising to me. That was probably, if I'd had to wrap up, the single most negatively surprising element of the game. It was, I really anticipated running backs that were going to go into the hole and just get stood up by Vita Vea, Greg Gaines, and those Jalen Johnson, and those big uglies up front, even though they didn't have Azim Victor in run support like they will this coming week and going forward. And especially in the beginning of the game, I just saw those guys going backwards on roller skates, and that was concerning to me, although certainly I'm not panicked. I think that I've seen enough of those same guys in that same position stand up and do a hell of a job against Alabama in a national semifinal game. Yeah. Other than a couple of big runs by Bo Scarborough, they did a great job in that game. If they can do it against Alabama last year, they can do it this year too.
Should be okay. And Azim Victor obviously will help. And no, I've commented the same thing. I thought that they just kind of absorbed too much push. They were a little bit too sticky. I think they need to get off blocks a little bit more. But going back to the Arizona game from a year ago, I was really concerned about the push that those defensive tackles were allowing. And it was bad. I mean, you put on that tape and you say, there's no way you would think that Washington's going undefeated through Pac-12 play if you watch the defensive tackles in that Arizona game. Mm-hmm. They just getting rooted out of there. And so the players, the coaches, they made the adjustment, and I'll expect it. And this wasn't a big problem. This is a function. I think our discussion is a function of where that bar is for Washington, right? They play good football, and then all of a sudden you say, "Wait a minute, I'm terrified. Why didn't they play great football?" Mm-hmm. Right? And so I think it's in that context. They weren't to their standards, but I think their standards are going to get better in a lot.
Finally,
their production is going to be a lot better.
One element of the game, they did play great football, and that was special teams. They got the 2 punts down at the 2-yard line, and they got Dante Pettis with another spectacular return. And here's Chris Peterson on his superstar return.
I mean, if we kick it out of the end zone, we'd love to do that every time. That would save us a lot of practice time. We're not going to work on kickoff, but that's easier said than done. And so when you got a really elite returner back there, we're going to mix things up. I mean, It's just a matter of time for that's going to do something. I mean, you can tell that guy has in my opinion, a great knack for whether it's punt returning or kickoff returning. He's very patient. When he sees a crease, he's got that knack to find the crease, and then he's a strong runner.
They never have to come after a punt this year. I mean, why even go try to block a punt and risk a roughing the kicker or a running into the kicker when you've got that guy back there that could take it at any point all the way back?
It's a fair point. I think if you just from time to time put it on tape, you make people prepare and you cause them to be in blocking schemes that can allow the punt return to happen.
I see.
So I don't think they're going to just entirely forego the block. But your point is taken. It certainly makes far more prudent sense to the bulk of the time give him those opportunities with their return. But you'll see a couple times where they're going after it.
We pass the torch to one Matt Slickhawk Mikolas in the next segment. Is he ready for it? It's the great debate on 950 KJR. Oh, that song means one thing and one thing only. Slickhawk not only is starting the debate, he's starting it with the showdown.
Which I love to do.
Now, you promised me I could save the long-term question for either tomorrow or Thursday, right? Okay.
Yeah, but then we do need to take an extended look at that.
Yes, we do.
I think it's going to be very important. The entire showdown could hinge on that question. Other teams, other shows losing points, this show gaining points.
We definitely need to do some research.
That's all going to come into play.
All right.
So we'll wait on that. But we do have a short-term question that we can knock out. Also, you pointed out, and I do want to reiterate that we are sneaking up on the competition.
We are only 1 point out of second place.
That's
all
correct.
Of a sudden.
That's correct.
After being declared dead and buried, we are now only 1 point out of second.
We started August, I think, 20 points back.
Yep.
Now we're like 14 points back.
And we started August like 15 points out of second, and now we're 1 point out of second. So the trend is heading the right direction.
So if we make up... How many points did we make? We made up 6 points in a month then, right?
Yeah.
So if we make up 6 points every month...
It's like the Mariners. The Mariners really, Slickhawk, only have to make up a half a game every week. And a little more than that. Okay. A game a week, and they got it nailed.
How many games left?
Mariners season, 25-ish, something like that.
Well, let's just see what they can do.
All right, what's our short-term question?
Short-term. Who will score the Seahawks' first touchdown of 2017?
All right, before I give you my answer, I'm going to defer to Hugh Breedlove-Millen because he does not like to do predictions, but what he does like to do is analyze football.
Yeah.
So, Hugh, Seahawks.
See what you did there?
See?
All the predictions I'm ever asked about it are pertaining to analyzing.
That's
football.
right. So you analyze the football, and then we'll give the predictions. How should and how will the Seahawks attack Green Bay first possession of the game? How would you go about attacking Green Bay? We're looking for the first touchdown score.
I think they're going to be mixed. I think they're going to they're mixture of run and pass, but I think that the passing game is going to be one where you're not going to take sacks. I think you're going to see bootlegs early. I think you're going to see quick passes early. I don't think they're going to want the crowd and the energy of the stadium to take over with, deep drops and long developing pass routes. I think first drive, that ball's coming out quick.
Yep.
And so now, how does that relate to trying to figure who scores the first touchdown? I'd rather have my eyeballs gouged out with a grapefruit spoon than trying to do these damn predictions. Okay?
We understand.
Right? Okay,
we understand how you feel about
you and you.
That's why we asked you about the analysis. You don't need any of this extraneous shots at people. We like to have our fun.
It's a fun
Every
thing.
show has fun. You don't need to be the guy that
for me
pees in the Cheerios.
For me,
right?
For me. Just my Cheerio bowl. I'll pee in it. I'm not peeing in your Cheerio bowl. You have whatever. It's
When's
my
the last
goal,
time-
and I'm saying I'm not doing predictions like that.
And that's why we asked you the question, and you gave us a nice answer. What we don't need is the extraneous, editorializing at the end.
Yeah. When's the last time? It could be this morning. It could be
Yeah.
last week. It could be last year.
Yeah.
When's the last time you just kind of sat, looked around, you're like, you know what? I'm having fun right now. I'm just having fun. When was that? Was your quarterback in the Huskies?
You know when it was, Slick? 1986 in the back of a pickup, I don't know, maybe out in the woods somewhere.
Do that. We could do that.
Under
We
the
could go.
stars,
We could go there.
Under the stars.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Well,
maybe a Coors Light.
Yeah. I I have fun thinking about blowing the head off of anybody who wants to bring a prediction. I have a lot of fun, man. I just grin from ear to ear.
But we got to answer the question.
I've got
Slick.
my answer.
I've got two guys.
I've got one guy.
All right. Well,
I
if one of your guys is the same as one of my twos, then we're going with that. I've got Jimmy Graham.
Jimmy effing Graham.
And I've got the guy that you think if they get inside the 3, you know they're going to want to let Eddie Lacy try to score at Lambeau Field.
Of
The
course.
first touchdown of the game.
But
so
which
which name are you going at?
Jimmy Graham
All right.
all
I'm fine.
day. I
I'm
think
fine.
that they're
I'm fine.
gonna.
I'm
I
fine.
think they're gonna try and force that a little bit in the red zone because they've ignored it for too long. I'm gonna say Jimmy.
Let's go.
Effing Graham.
That's our number. That's our guy. That's our guy. Jimmy Graham for the first touchdown of the game. Now to the debate, and we can welcome Hugh back in.
If
Such
if
a
I
poor
if it
sport
says,
over
"Do
there."
you expect?" Is that a prediction?
Depends on what the question is.
Well, I'm gonna ask the question. We're gonna see what Hugh has to say.
All right.
It was clear on Friday. Jake Browning's arm is all but recovered. He was winging deep balls with zip and accuracy.
Was he winging with zip, really?
I thought it was zippy.
Okay.
A long
Go
ball
on,
he had.
Go on.
Last year, before his shoulder injury, he was toward the top of the Heisman contenders. Do you expect that Jake Browning will catapult himself back to that elite status this year?
We kind of talked about that earlier, but will he be considered one of the elite quarterbacks in college football?
Yeah.
Yes, because he's got a big name that people recognize, and he's going to play for a team that very likely will be in the top 10 all season long.
Talking Heisman contender elite.
Yes, but like I mentioned earlier, Hugh, I just don't think a Washington quarterback in a balanced attack with those kind of running backs that you want to give the ball to 40-ish times a game is going to put up the requisite numbers to be a true Heisman Trophy candidate.
Well, he put up 43 touchdowns last year, which was that not leading the country? If it wasn't leading the country for a good portion, but he shattered the school record.
Yes, he did.
I don't want to disagree with your point because I do think you have to have those just mammoth numbers, not just the touchdowns but the yards. I do think it's possible for a quarterback in a balanced system. I mean, Sam Darnold, ostensibly USC is going to be, if they're going to reach their expectations, they're going to be very efficient running the football, and so Darnold would be in the same category as Jake Browning. So
Right.
if you're talking stylistically with respects to the offense, I think Browning and Darnold go into the same category. Now they're different styles physically, and what they can do, their skill sets are different.
But Darnold's not
in
going to
terms
wing
of
it
the
around
offense, it's not
50 times a game either.
Yeah. So I think it's possible in that
Browning
regard.
was second, by the way, in touchdown passes.
Touchdown.
last year. Yep.
Who was number one?
Logan Woodside of Toledo.
But you could say he's number one in Power 5.
Yes, you could.
So I don't think he's going to win the Heisman. If for no other reason, I don't think anybody's going to win the Heisman. And what I mean by, obviously somebody's going to win it, but I would take the field over any one person. So
Right.
when you asked me, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
was it is
Do you
he
expect-
a candidate?
Yeah,
or,
is he going to be a Heisman contender? Is he
you know
going
what
to
might be a
catapult
good
himself
question?
to
Be
that?
is he going to New York? Because
I
that would
didn't-
put him in the top.
But that
3 or
would have
4.
been a prediction. I wanted to stay away from that.
Thank you.
That's-
You heard the blow the head
That's
off,
cut and
comment,
dry.
didn't you?
I like my head right where it's
Yeah,
at,
right.
in one piece.
I don't think he's going to New York.
If I had to bet, I'd probably say no. That was a hell of a season, record setting. But I think John Ross made a lot of that stuff. And right now, I think they're trying to find themselves as a receiving core. Dante Pettis, top shelf, Absolutely top shelf. Everybody else, unproven.
9:39 on 950 KJR. He's got some more questions for us coming up next in the final segment before Chuck and Puck. I got an article that popped up in the Seattle Times I want to get to here, but we'll have you fire the debate question. But I want to get your take in a second on this article. I don't know if you read it or not, Slickhawk, about the potential now that fans can rent NFL jerseys instead of buying NFL jerseys.
Yeah, I saw
did you
something
see that?
about that.
I'll read it to you in a minute, but go ahead and fire off our debate question here to Hugh and myself.
JD Martinez hit 4 home runs last night. If you could be in the building for 1 feat in sports to say, hey, I witnessed that, what would it be?
DiMaggio.
Any sport, huh?
Yeah. You want to see the hits record broke.
Yeah, I want to see that.
Consecutive hits.
If we're kind of going down the record.
57.
Yeah, 57. Yeah, no, that's like the most hollowed record of my life.
And it's got to be baseball, doesn't it? Because baseball, no other sports has records like
records
baseball.
In the fabric. I mean, quick, how many yards? First of all, you probably know this. Who's the rush king in the NFL?
Emmett.
How many yards?
I've got
you don't
no
know.
idea.
18,000?
No, I don't think it's that many.
Who's the pass king for one season in yards?
Drew Brees.
You sure?
No. Could be Peyton Manning.
I think it is Drew Brees, though, isn't it?
I think Peyton Manning. I think it
Manning?
was Drew Brees.
Or is it Manning in the year that we beat him in the Super Bowl?
My
Career
point is,
or season?
My point is
we don't know.
Yeah.
Some of those baseball records, they're just locked in. It's just records are more part of the fabric of baseball.
What's the best?
It doesn't have to be a record,
historic. What's the best historic feat you've ever witnessed in person? Have you witnessed any?
You know, I'll answer a slightly different question. I thought it was really cool being on the sideline when John Elway got 40,000 yards, and I hung out a lot with him, drank a lot of beers, went snowmobiling at his house. You know, got to know John pretty well. We called him Woody. His nickname with the Broncos was Woody, and he was a really humble guy about, you know, what he was doing and where he was in the pantheon of quarterbacks. And I can remember he got 40,000 yards, and at the time he got it, you'd have to look it up. There was less than 5 guys in the league who had ever done it. You know, like Tarkenton, Fouts, you know, I mean, the small list. And they gave him the game ball. They said, Elway, hey, congratulations to Woody. 40,000 yards, only the 4th guy or whatever he was ever to do it. And our locker was right next to it. I can tell you that he was as unmoved by that as a guy could possibly be. He just totally unmoved. And in all the time that I knew him, which wasn't a long time, but the only time I ever heard him mention any personal goal, he did utter once the words, "Let me get to 50,000 yards and then they could judge me." That sentence I just said to you is the only sentence I ever heard. I'm just talking about me. I'm not saying he didn't say it, but in my presence, the only sentence I ever heard about him and where he was going. And, you know, a lot of people think he's the greatest quarterback ever. Very few people think he's out of the top 5. Right? Most people probably settle in around 3-4, you know, in terms of, you know, I mean, you're talking about an immensely impactful player in the history of the game. I mean, he was named the Pac-12's all-time greatest player. But that's what he said. I remember him, and it was so out of character. I remember it, and he didn't say it profoundly, like with some emphasis. He just said, well, let me get to 50,000 yards, and then they can judge me. That's it. That's all I ever heard.
I think
so.
Yeah, I'm trying to think the games that I've been to that had historic significance as far as records being set. I was at Randy Johnson's no-hitter.
Yeah.
I was at Greg Maddox's, just totally random, Greg Maddox 300th win, which is it was in San Francisco.
Very good.
I happened to be in San Francisco the weekend, and I was actually tracking Maddox. I was like, oh my God. I was telling my buddies we were going with.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm timing this out, dude. I think he's pitching one of these games that we're at, and sure enough, he was at 299 going into the game. So that was kind of cool to see. And then Marcus's 300-200 game.
Yeah, I was there. Yeah, I was.
We were at that game.
Historic.
I mean, that was the first time ever in college football history, a 300-200.
If you go to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, there's a little glass case where you see Glenn Milburn's uniform. Glenn Milburn was
Stanford
running back, played for the Broncos, and against the Seahawks, coincidentally. Against the Seahawks, he set the NFL record for most yards. Now,
punt return, kick return, receiving,
total yard,
running,
yards
like
from scrimmage.
350 or something like that.
Kicking, receiving, rushing. It was pushing 500. It was basically 4.5. Maybe Slick, could you Google that real quick? But it was. I'm gonna throw 457 as the over under. I just somewhere around 450.
Wow.
I think the first and second number were 4 and 5.
It was against the Seahawks.
It was against the Seahawks.
Why don't I remember?
And I was.
And you were on the team at the time?
Yeah, I was on the team at the time.
Okay.
I don't know. But again, it goes.
Cool.
I default back to the baseball records. I just think that I'd love to see a guy hit 5 home runs. I hope I see that before I die. But I think that the DiMaggio record to me is the sexiest sports record there is,
and maybe the hardest to break. I mean, there's certain records that are going to be untouched forever just because the game has changed. For example, nobody's going to break Cy Young's win record because pitchers are not going to be allowed to pitch long enough into games to break that record. But as far as records that could be broken, I think you're right. I think that's hard. That's harder than.
And I think
anything.
I think the fact that you're under the gun a little bit. Some of the records. Okay. Who was the Oriole?
Cal Ripken.
Cal Ripken. Okay, you knew when he was going to do it, but all he really had to do
show
was
up.
not, just be
show
there.
up.
Okay.
Well, there's a little bit more involved.
You have to stay healthy,
get sick, not get hurt.
But as
in
people
19 years
could, I don't know. I just felt like, okay, great, but it didn't have. There wasn't the drama. I mean, if you ever, we kind of talked about in the first hour, but if we ever could get somebody on a DiMaggio assault, and by the way, just the fact that the longevity of the record and the fact that it's Joe DiMaggio, the Marilyn Monroe and the Simon and Garfunkel, that Joe DiMaggio, right?
Right.
You know the reference, right?
Yeah.
Right. It would have all the more appeal. But that player's going to be under the gun. It's not going to be like, I touched attaboy, the touchdown record where you say, well, if he doesn't get it this game, in theory, I guess a guy could come into the last game. But I think when you consider that a good hitter hits in the 300s, but he's going to have 4 ABs in a game, call it 4 ABs, and he's got to get that hit.
Just think about the odds
for the 57th game. Yeah. The country would be on its ear for that. Yeah. It would transcend sports. People who are, it'd be like the eclipse. Everybody just stop and watch.
Just think about if you're a 500 hitter, Hugh. Just think about if you had two. Let's say you had a black card and a red card.
Yes.
Okay, face down.
You're talking my language, Dick. Keep
and
going,
for
man.
56,
I'm popping a chubby with this type of logic, man. Go, Dick.
56 consecutive times, you're going to turn over the red card.
Yeah.
And that's if you're a 500 hitter.
Yeah.
Not a 350 hitter or a 400. A 500 hitter, you still have to turn over the red card 56 times in a row to have that inning streak.
I'm tracking, man.
That is
anyways, that'd be it. Are we in agreement? Can we think of anything better?
I love that.
Is there an Olympic record?
That's one way you could go. I was thinking perfect game. I'd love to see a perfect game.
That's happened 20
Come on, I mean,
it's happened 20 sometimes. No, I mean what you're talking about
is like climbing Mount Rainier. I mean,
I don't want to do that.
It's a good accomplishment, but come on, it's not going to turn the earth on its axis. 57 games is going to go from 23 to 24 and a half. That's what's going to happen to the world. That would be a fun ride.
It'd be incredible. Fun ride today, man. Thanks.
Yeah, guys.
Appreciate it.
We'll talk 23 degrees. Is that right?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Turn it on its axis even more.
Hey.
We'll talk to you tomorrow. We got Jason Lockenford in tomorrow as well. Hugh Breedlove Millen's got something to say tomorrow as well. We'll do it all next on 950 KJR. Chuck and Buck are here
from the Triple